ATA for ditching my stepsister at the airport? Okay, I don't usually post on here, but after what just happened with my family, I honestly don't know where else to vent. I need outside opinions because right now my phone is blowing up with texts. My dad hasn't said a word to me since yesterday, and my stepmom keeps posting passive-aggressive "family is everything red heart" quotes on Facebook that are clearly about me. So, buckle up, because this is going to sound ridiculous, but I promise every word is true. For context, I, 24F, have a stepsister, let's call her Brianna, 22F. Our parents married when we were both in high school. I was a sophomore, she was a freshman. And if you've ever been through that blended family dynamic, you know it can be messy. At first, I thought maybe it would be nice. Like, I'd always wondered what it'd be like to have a sister. Someone to borrow clothes from, someone to watch movies with at night, someone who'd cover for me when I missed curfew. That hallmark version of sisterhood. But Brianna? She wasn't that kind of stepsister. If I had to describe her in one sentence, it would be this. She has the uncanny ability to make everything about her. Like, if you stub your toe, somehow she's going to remind you that her ankle sprain 3 years ago was way worse. And did you ever notice that nobody checked on her enough during recovery? There's this running joke in my extended family, though it's not really a joke. It's more like a resigned observation, that if Brianna gets a paper cut, you better brace yourself, because she will turn it into a tragedy. She'll demand sympathy, attention, and accommodations like she's been mortally wounded. And God forbid you don't respond with the right level of concern, because then you're cold or unsupportive. Meanwhile, I'm the opposite. I don't like to make a fuss. I'm punctual, organized, and if something needs to get done, I just quietly do it. My dad noticed this about me early on, especially after he remarried. He knew Brianna could be dramatic and my stepmom had a tendency to enable her, so he would often lean on me as the responsible one. Which, I'll admit, sometimes felt flattering, but other times it felt like I was being shoved into this role of unpaid babysitter / project manager of our family. Anyway, fast forward to this past weekend. We had a huge family trip planned. My cousin, who I grew up with basically like a sibling, was getting married. And not just any cousin wedding where you show up and sit in the back row. I was actually in the bridal party. My cousin had asked me months ago, and I'd been so excited about it. We were flying across the country to get there, and this was not something I could miss. My dad pulled me aside the week before and literally said, "Don't let anyone make us late. This trip is too important." He gave me the responsibility of coordinating flights and making sure we got to the airport on time. He trusted me with this, because he knows I'm the one who has their act together. And I took that seriously. I researched flights. I made a packing list. I sent out reminders to everyone about what time we had to leave for the airport. I even built in a buffer, because I know how my stepmom likes to just throw one more thing in the bag at the last minute, and how Brianna tends to move at the speed of a snail when she's getting ready. I thought I had planned for every possible delay, but I did not account for what actually happened. See, the thing about Brianna is that she doesn't just create problems, she creates production value. She'll take a minor inconvenience and inflate it until it's this all-consuming crisis that derails everything around her. And deep down, I think she thrives on it. She likes the attention, the drama, the chance to be the center of the story. I should have known something was going to go wrong the second I walked into the kitchen the morning of our flight and saw her sitting at the counter with this pitiful look on her face. She had her head resting dramatically in her hands, like she was in a soap opera. When I asked what was wrong, she sighed so loudly you'd think someone had just told her she had 24 hours to live. But here's the thing, I didn't have time to deal with whatever that was. I was on a mission. We had to get to the airport 2 hours early, especially since this was a major airline and a busy weekend. I had everyone's boarding passes printed and on my phone. I had the Uber already scheduled. But of course, Brianna. And this is where things started unraveling in a way that even my best buffer time couldn't fix. Because the crisis Brianna was about to unleash, it wasn't about forgetting her passport. It wasn't about oversleeping. It wasn't even about missing luggage. It was about something way more ridiculous. Something that, if I hadn't lived through it myself, I would never believe. And it all came down to this. Brianna was constipated. The morning of the flight actually started off fine. Shockingly fine, to be honest. We left the house on time. My dad was calm, which is rare. My stepmom was double-checking everyone's bags, and Brianna wasn't putting on her usual Broadway-level performance about something trivial. I almost let myself believe maybe this trip would go smoothly. And when we pulled up to the airport, still smooth. Security line wasn't bad. Nobody forgot their ID, and somehow, even with Brianna trailing behind like she was allergic to moving quickly, we made it through with enough time to spare. We even had about 40 minutes before boarding. 40 whole minutes. I could literally feel the tension leaving my shoulders as I texted my cousin, "We're at the gate. Can't wait to see you." For the first time all morning, I let myself relax. I thought, okay, crisis avoided. I did it. We're good. And then Brianna opened her mouth. She leaned in close, whispering in this urgent yet dramatic tone she always uses, and said, "I haven't gone to the bathroom properly in 3 days. I feel like I'm about to explode." I just blinked at her. Like, what was I supposed to say to that? Congratulations? My condolences? TMI? I settled on the safest option. I gave a polite, "Oh, that sucks," nod, and then went back to scrolling through my phone. But of course, that wasn't enough. Brianna continued, louder this time. "No, seriously. I think I need to do something. I'm going to the airport pharmacy to get laxatives." Now, look, I get it. Everyone has stomach issues sometimes. But we were at the gate. Boarding was in less than 40 minutes. And laxatives? Those aren't instant fixes. If anything, I knew that was going to make her feel worse before it made her feel better. So I told her, fine, but hurry. And then she wandered off. Wandered. She didn't jog, didn't speed walk, she strolled, like she was browsing the farmer's market on a Sunday morning. Meanwhile, I was sitting there watching the boarding clock tick down, checking my phone every 30 seconds, texting her, "Where are you?" and getting absolutely nothing back. 10 minutes. 15. My dad was blowing up my phone now, asking, "Where are you to?" They're starting the pre-boarding. My stepmom was just checking in every other second. And I'm sitting there pacing the carpet, torn between running to hunt Brianna down or waiting by the gate in case she magically appeared. Finally, 20 minutes later, she comes sauntering back. Not rushing, not apologetic, just totally unbothered, holding a bag of laxatives in one hand and a smoothie in the other. Like she had just gone on a leisurely shopping trip. I swear, my jaw almost hit the floor. I hissed at her, "Brianna, what the hell took so long? We're boarding right now." And she just shrugged. Took a sip of her smoothie like she was auditioning for a yogurt commercial, then casually dropped the bomb that nearly made me lose my mind. "I can't get on this flight until I use the bathroom. I'll just catch the next one." I swear I felt my soul leave my body, because here's the thing, flights don't work like that. You can't just catch the next one like you're hailing a bus. Especially not on a weekend. Especially not when we had to be there for a wedding rehearsal dinner later that night. Especially not when I had explicitly been put in charge of making sure this didn't happen. So I said, "Brianna, what are you even talking about? You can't just decide not to board. The next flight isn't guaranteed. We'll miss everything." And she just looked at me, all calm and defiant, and repeated, "I'm not getting on this plane until I go." Like it was the most reasonable request in the world. At that point, people were lining up to board. My dad was texting, "Get here now." My stomach was in knots. And Brianna? She was perched in her seat, sipping her smoothie, acting like she had all the time in the world. That was the exact moment I realized this was about to become a disaster. I just stood there, staring at her in disbelief, trying to process the words coming out of her mouth. "I can't get on this flight. I'll just catch the next one." It didn't even compute. My brain was screaming, does she seriously think this is how airlines work? Does she think planes are like Ubers? So I tried reasoning with her as calmly as I could while the boarding announcement chimed overhead. "Brianna," I said, lowering my voice so I wouldn't scream, "you can't just miss this flight. We don't have the money or the time for extra tickets. Plus, Dad is literally depending on us. If you don't get on now, you're screwing over everyone." She crossed her arms and shook her head. Do you even understand what I'm going through? Sitting on a plane for 5 hours with a clogged system would be literal torture. You're not listening to me. I swear I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it was breaking my brain. Torture? We're talking about constipation here, not medieval punishment devices. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. It was Dad. All caps. Dad, get to the gate now. They're calling final boarding. My stepmom followed up with, Stepmom, we can't hold the plane for you. Hurry. I could practically feel my pulse in my temples. My heart was in my throat. All I could picture was my cousin standing at her rehearsal dinner that night, looking around for me, realizing I wasn't there. The bridal party photos without me. The disappointed look on her face. So I snapped. Brianna, you need to suck it up and get on the plane. You can deal with this when we land. You can go at the hotel. This is not the end of the world. But then she hit me with the line that made my stomach drop. She looked me dead in the eye, completely serious, and said, If you leave me, I'll never forgive you. I need you to stay with me. That was it. The guilt trip. The manipulation. The move she always pulls when she wants me to bend to her drama. Turn it into a loyalty test. And in that moment, I realized what she was doing. She didn't just want to miss the flight. She wanted me to miss it too. Because heaven forbid she sit at the airport alone, dealing with the consequences of her own choices. She wanted me to tank my cousin's wedding weekend so she wouldn't have to suffer solo through her torture. My hands were shaking. The gate agent was making the final boarding call. Dad's texts were coming in like machine gun fire. And Brianna was sitting there, smoothie in hand, eyes locked on me like this was some kind of sisterly ultimatum. Do I stay behind with her and destroy my cousin's trust in me? Or do I walk away and face the inevitable fallout at home? Either way, someone was about to hate me. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The gate agent was announcing, final call for boarding flight 227 to Charlotte. Dad's texts were still popping up on my phone in all caps, like a drill sergeant barking orders. Dad, now. Get on the plane. Dad, they're closing the doors. And then there was Brianna, sitting there with her arms crossed, smoothie cup sweating on the table beside her, eyes narrowed like she was the tragic heroine of some soap opera. I had seconds to choose. On one side, my dad's voice in my head, don't let anyone make us late. This trip is too important. On the other, Brianna's unspoken demand. If you really cared about me, you'd stay. You'd sacrifice this for me. It felt like being tugged in two directions at once. And the sick part? Some tiny corner of me hesitated because I've been conditioned my whole life to manage Brianna, to bend around her chaos, to smooth things over so my dad doesn't get angry, so my stepmom doesn't guilt me, so everything doesn't explode. But this time, I couldn't. I looked her straight in the eye and said, voice shaking but firm, I'm sorry, but I can't miss this wedding. You're an adult. You can book the next flight if you really can't come. For a half second, she just stared at me, like she couldn't process that I was actually refusing to play along. And then she snapped. Her face twisted, she slammed her smoothie down so hard some of it splashed out the straw, and she spat. You cold-hearted beat CH, asterisk. Loud, right there in the middle of the terminal. People stopped. Heads turned. A mom covered her kids' ears. Some guy in a business suit looked over like, what fresh drama is this? I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But the gate agent's voice cut through my mortification. Last call for passenger, my name. If you are not present, the doors will close. That was it. My window was closing. So I turned on my heel and ran. My backpack thumped against my shoulder. My phone buzzed nonstop in my hand. And I sprinted down that jet bridge like my entire life depended on it. I got to the doors just as the gate agent was reaching to close them. Wait, I'm here, I gasped, boarding pass shaking in my hand. She scanned it, gave me the tightest smile, and waved me through. When I stepped onto the plane, my dad looked up from his seat. His expression was this unreadable mix of relief and disappointment, like, okay, you made it, but where's your sister? I quickly explained, in a low voice, she wouldn't get on. She said she needed to, you know. She's rebooking. He closed his eyes, shook his head once, and didn't say a word. We took off. We landed. We made it to the wedding on time. And Brianna? She did not. Apparently, she spent 3 more hours haunting the airport bathrooms like some tragic ghost before finally buying herself a rebooked ticket, and yes, it cost her a pretty penny. She arrived a full day late, rolling her suitcase into the rehearsal dinner like she was making a red carpet entrance. And of course, she told anyone who would listen exactly why she was late. My body just wouldn't cooperate. And OP abandoned me. She left me when I was suffering. She made it sound like I ditched her in the middle of a war zone, not a fully staffed international airport with customer service desks, restaurants, and a freaking Starbucks every 20 feet. By the end of that night, everyone knew Brianna's foul schedule. And I knew the real storm was still coming. If I thought the worst part was behind me when I finally collapsed into my cousin's guest room that first night, I was wrong. Because when Brianna finally arrived, 24 hours late, frazzled, dragging her suitcase into the hotel lobby like some martyr returning from battle, she immediately launched into damage control. Her version of events? That she had been abandoned. That she had a medical crisis, and I had chosen some wedding over my own sister. She made it sound like I'd left her stranded in the desert without water, not, at a major airport with a phone, money, and fully functioning bathrooms. And my stepmom? Oh, she was livid. She cornered me the next morning before the bridal party breakfast and hissed, "How could you leave her like that? She needed you, and you chose your cousin over her. Blood should come first." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Blood? Brianna and I aren't even biologically related. And even if we were, since when does family mean sacrificing your cousin's wedding because someone can't poop? But my stepmom didn't want logic. She wanted someone to blame, and I was the easy target. Meanwhile, my dad, he was a different story. He pulled me aside quietly at the reception, handed me a glass of champagne, and muttered, "You did the right thing. If you'd missed this for her drama, you'd never forgive yourself." But then he sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and added, "Just don't make me pick sides. I can't deal with the fallout right now." Classic dad, secretly relieved I took the bullet, but too conflict avoidant to say it out loud. And Brianna? She doubled down. She started posting passive-aggressive things on Instagram and Facebook the whole weekend. Stuff like, "Some people care more about weddings than family. Nothing like being abandoned when you're at your lowest. True colors always show when you need someone most." Every caption was accompanied by a heavily filtered selfie of her looking tragic in the hotel mirror, like she was auditioning for the role of constipation survivor in a Netflix docuseries. The kicker? By the second day, people at the wedding had caught wind of what happened. My cousin's fiancé's brother started jokingly calling her Airport Constipation Girl. It spread like wildfire. By the time she made her grand late entrance at the reception, half the bridal party was whispering behind their napkins, stifling laughter. Brianna, of course, was furious. Every giggle, every side-eye, every whispered, "There she is," only made her more bitter. And naturally, she blamed me. Now we're home, and the Cold War has officially begun. My stepmom won't look me in the eye. Brianna has unfollowed me on every platform and is still sulking like I left her for dead. My dad is Switzerland, pretending everything is fine, but quietly checking in to make sure I'm okay. And me? I honestly don't know how to feel. On one hand, I keep replaying the look on Brianna's face when I walked away at that gate. She really did look betrayed, like I'd left her behind on some desert island. A part of me wonders if I was cold. But on the other hand, let's be real. I had a commitment to my cousin, who asked me to stand by her on one of the biggest days of her life. I had responsibilities, a promise, and a whole wedding depending on me. Brianna's stomach issues are not my responsibility, and she's an adult who can, and did, book her own flight. So here I am, typing this out because I can't stop second-guessing myself. Was I ruthless? Or was I simply the only one willing to draw a line in the sand? So, Aita for leaving my stepsister at the airport because she was constipated?
AITA for refusing to pay my step-siblings' college? So this is messy, and my whole family is divided right now. I'm honestly still trying to process it myself because I never thought something so generous something I thought came from love, would end up becoming the very thing ripping us apart. For background, I'm a 29-year-old guy, the oldest kid in my family by quite a bit. My parents divorced when I was 12. It wasn't the ugliest divorce in history, but it wasn't friendly either. I remember vividly the day my dad sat us down in the living room, hands clasped so tightly they looked white, and told us that things weren't working out with Mom. I didn't fully get it then, but I knew it meant he wasn't coming home anymore. After the split, my mom basically became everything: provider, caregiver, teacher, chauffeur. She worked her ass off just to keep food on the table and the lights on. I was old enough to see it. I was old enough to hear her crying quietly at night when she thought we were asleep. My little sister, 22F now, but just a kid back then, would sometimes crawl into bed with her, and my little brother, now 19M, was so small he barely understood what was happening. I stepped up because I had to. It wasn't heroic or anything, it was survival. I cooked ramen, I babysat, I cleaned. I got my first under-the-table job at 14, washing dishes at this greasy little diner 2 blocks away. The owner knew my mom and turned a blind eye to my age. Every dollar I made went to groceries or helping with bills. By the time I hit high school, I was balancing school, sports, and part-time work. But here's the thing, I was good at school. Like really good. Maybe it was spite, maybe it was a survival instinct, but I buried myself in academics. I had this obsession with the idea that if I worked hard enough, I could dig us out of the mess we were in. I graduated with a full-ride scholarship. When I tell you my mom cried the day I got that acceptance letter, I mean sobbed. She hugged me so tightly I could feel her shoulders shaking. That scholarship wasn't just for me. It was a lifeline for the whole family. College wasn't easy. I worked multiple jobs, tutoring, waiting tables, summer internships. I hustled nonstop because I knew every penny mattered. But when I graduated, I was debt-free. That's rare these days, right? Everyone I knew was drowning in loans, but I had this strange advantage. While other people were paying off tens of thousands in debt, I was able to start saving, investing, planning. I got into a high-paying field right out of school, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. I didn't live extravagantly. I wasn't out here buying fancy cars or designer clothes. I just saved. And as the years went on, those savings grew. Here's where things get important. When my siblings were in high school, I sat them down. I remember the exact night. We were in the kitchen. Mom was making spaghetti, cheap but filling, our family classic, and my sister was stressing about whether she'd even be able to afford college. She was talking about community college, financial aid, loans. Her voice cracked when she said she didn't want to be a burden. That broke me. She was 16 and already thinking of herself as a burden. So I told them, her and my little brother, that if they worked hard in school, if they got into college, I'd cover tuition. Not loans. Not, I'll help a little. I would take care of it. I said it in front of my mom and she froze. Then she started crying, like full-on tears rolling down her cheeks, because she knew what a difference that would make. I meant it with every fiber of my being. Fast forward. My sister got into a great school, and I've been paying for her tuition. She's now in her last year, thriving. My brother just got his acceptance letter, and I've already set aside enough for him, too. It hasn't been easy. Tuition is no joke, but I planned for this. I invested, I budgeted, I cut corners in my own life so they could have opportunities one didn't. Watching my sister flourish, seeing her confidence grow, it made every sacrifice worth it. Now here's where the messy part comes in. My dad remarried about 5 years ago. His new wife, let's call her Diane, has 2 kids of her own, a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. I've always been civil with them, but we're not close. I didn't grow up with them. We don't have that sibling bond. We're more like polite acquaintances who happen to share some family gatherings. First, I thought everything was fine. I thought I could just keep my head down, focus on my siblings, and everyone would go about their business. But lately, that fine has turned into something else. Something ugly. Because apparently my promise, the one I made to my siblings, the one I've worked my entire adult life to fulfill, is now being twisted into something else entirely. And I don't know how to even begin to explain the chaos that's come from it. What started as me stepping up for my siblings has now spiraled into accusations, guilt tripping, and family politics I never imagined I'd be dragged into. My dad and his new family have opinions, loud ones, about what I owe. And the worst part? My siblings, my mom, and I are caught in the middle of a storm I didn't see coming. Last weekend, we were all at my dad's house for a barbecue. It was supposed to be this casual family thing, burgers, hot dogs, some cold beers, the usual small talk. I'll be honest, I wasn't super excited to go. I love my dad, but things have been complicated since his remarriage. I always feel like a guest in his new life, like I'm on the outside looking in. His wife, Diane, is polite enough most of the time, but she has this way of speaking that makes me feel like I'm being sized up. You know that subtle judgment you can't quite put your finger on, but you feel it in your bones? Yeah, that's Diane. Anyway, I showed up with my sister and brother. My mom wasn't invited, of course. Dad was in his element, manning the grill, wearing one of those kiss the cook aprons like he was auditioning for a sitcom. His stepkids were in the backyard too, lounging around with their phones, occasionally tossing a frisbee. It was fine. Awkward, but fine. We sat down to eat, paper plates loaded with food, and for a while it was just casual chatter. Weather, sports, my sister's classes, my brother's excitement about starting college. And then Diane, God, I'll never forget this, leaned back in her chair, fork dangling from her hand, and said with this little laugh, "Well, luckily we don't have to worry too much about the cost of college. Since OP has been so generous with his siblings, I'm sure he'll do the same for our two when the time comes." The way she said it, light-hearted, but with this undercurrent of assumption, made my stomach drop. I froze. My sister literally choked on her drink. My brother looked at me like, what the hell did she just say? I forced a laugh, awkward and thin, and said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I promised my siblings I'd help them, but that's it. Silence. Diane blinked like I had just slapped her. She actually set her fork down and stared at me. Wait, what do you mean that's it? You've been helping your sister. You've already set aside money for your brother. Why wouldn't you do the same for Lily and Josh? Those are her kids, by the way. I felt this heat creeping up the back of my neck. I said slowly because I wanted to be clear, because I never promised them anything. They're not my responsibility. I promised my siblings because we grew up together, struggling. I stepped in because I know firsthand how hard it was. But I've known your kids for 5 years. They have their own dad. That's when my dad jumped in, and his voice carried that dangerous, patronizing calm he gets when he's about to lecture me. Come on, son. You've been blessed. Don't you think it's only fair to treat all the kids equally? They're your family too. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I said, flatly, they're not my siblings. They're your stepkids. And again, they have a father. I never made them a promise. I made one to the people who shared those nights eating ramen by candlelight because the power got shut off. That's not something Lily or Josh went through with me. That's not their story. The air got thick. I could feel my sister shifting uncomfortably beside me, my brother staring at his plate. Diane's face turned this blotchy red, her mouth twitching like she was holding back a full-blown explosion. Then she snapped. So you're saying my kids don't matter? That they're less deserving? Do you have any idea how entitled and selfish that sounds? I was floored. Selfish? For paying tens of thousands of dollars so my siblings wouldn't drown in debt? For sacrificing years of my own financial comfort to keep my promise? Before I could even respond, my dad piled on. It's not about promises. It's about fairness. You can't pick and choose which kids are worthy of your support. You're in a position to help, and that means all of them. Or don't you see Lily and Josh's family? I swear to God, in that moment I wanted to flip the table, but I didn't. I just sat there, my appetite gone, the smell of grilled meat suddenly making me nauseous. I said carefully, don't twist this. I love that you've found happiness, Dad. I'm glad Lily and Josh are in your life, but they're not my responsibility. I'm not their parent. I'm not their provider. I didn't sign up for that role, and I won't be guilt-tripped into it. And that's when the mood soured beyond repair. The rest of the barbecue was painfully tense. Diane sulked, her kids avoided eye contact, and my dad gave me this cold, disappointed look like I'd failed some unspoken test. My sister and brother were whispering to me under their breath, telling me not to back down, but I felt like I was walking a tightrope over fire. When we finally left, my sister muttered, "That was insane." And my brother said, "They're out of their minds if they think you're paying for them too." I wish that was the end of it. I wish it was just one awkward barbecue. But oh no, that was only the beginning. Because what happened next turned this from an uncomfortable misunderstanding into an all-out war. After that barbecue, Diane didn't just drop it. She escalated. Suddenly, it wasn't just a family disagreement, it was a campaign. She started calling me, messaging me, even rallying my dad's relatives to her side. And what she said about me behind my back. It was nuclear. That night, after the barbecue, I got a call from my dad. My phone lit up around 10:30 p.m., and I just knew, it wasn't going to be good. I almost didn't answer. My sister was still at my place, venting about how insane Diane had been, and my brother was scrolling through his phone with this permanent scowl on his face. I didn't want to ruin the little bit of calm we'd managed to reclaim after leaving that disaster of a family gathering. But it was my dad, and ignoring him would only make it worse. So I picked up. His voice was clipped, already raised, no hello or how are you, just straight to, "I cannot believe the way you embarrassed me and Diane tonight. What the hell were you thinking?" I sat back on my couch, my jaw tightening. "Embarrassed you? All I did was correct a misunderstanding. I'm not paying for Diane's kids, Dad. I never said I would." He didn't even let me finish. "Don't play dumb. You basically announced to everyone that Lily and Josh don't matter. Do you understand how cruel that sounded? You're drawing lines in this family, punishing them for not being biologically related to you." That word, punishing, made my blood boil. I bit back the first 10 things I wanted to say and tried to keep my voice calm. Punishing them? Dad, when I was 18, applying to colleges, I begged you for help with application fees. Do you remember what you said? Silence on his end, just his breathing through the phone. I pressed on, my voice shaking now. Not from fear, but from the flood of old anger rising up. "You told me I needed to figure it out myself. That was the year you bought that shiny new car. The year you went to Cancun with your girlfriend, now wife, while Mom was scraping together every cent she had. Do you know who actually paid those application fees? Mom. She used her tax refund. That's how I even got my shot at college." My chest was pounding. My sister glanced at me nervously, mouthing, "You okay?" I waved her off. I took a breath and said, clear as day, "I'm not responsible for the choices you made back then, and I'm not responsible for the choices you're making now. I love my siblings. I made them a commitment and I'm following through. That's where my responsibility ends." The line went quiet for a beat. Then my dad's voice came back, low and sharp. "You are so selfish. You are so damn ungrateful. Everything you have, you think you built that all on your own? You think you'd be where you are without me? Without this family?" I actually laughed, bitter and humorless. "Without you? Dad, you left Mom to carry the weight of everything. She is the reason I am who I am. She is the reason I even had the chance to make something of myself. Don't rewrite history now just because you feel guilty." That's when he dropped the nuclear line. "If you don't help them, if you don't step up for Lily and Josh, then don't bother coming around anymore." My stomach dropped, but not out of shock. Out of recognition. I've heard variations of that threat my whole life, whenever I dared to push back on him. The conditional love. The way he tries to leverage family as a bargaining chip. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and said quietly, "If that's how you feel, then I guess I won't be coming around anymore." For a second, he didn't respond. Then he scoffed, muttered something about me flaunting my money, and hung up, just like that. No goodbye, no hesitation. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, staring into nothing. My sister's eyes were wide, my brother's face twisted in disgust. "Did he really say that?" my sister whispered. "Yeah," I said. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep it steady. "He did. And here's the part that's been eating at me ever since. A piece of me actually feels relieved, like I've been holding on to this hope that maybe, just maybe, my dad would someday show up for me. For us, the way I always needed him to. And now, the mask is off. He's made his stance crystal clear. But another part of me feels this deep ache, like I'm mourning someone who's still alive. Because even though I know I'm right, even though I know I'm not being selfish, I still hear his words echoing in my head. Ungrateful, selfish, don't bother coming around anymore. And Diane? Oh, she didn't stay quiet after this. If anything, she doubled down. Because the next morning, I woke up to texts and voicemails that made my blood run cold. Diane had started calling around, spinning the story, twisting the narrative, painting me as the heartless, selfish stepbrother who abandoned family. And she wasn't just telling my dad's side of the family. She was reaching everyone. The smear campaign had begun. 2 days later, things hit the breaking point. I was at work, trying to keep my head down and pretend like life was normal, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook Messenger. I saw Diane's name and immediately felt my stomach twist. Part of me wanted to ignore it, just hit delete, pretend it didn't exist. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. It was a novel, paragraph after paragraph, written like some passive-aggressive essay, dripping with faux concern and moral superiority. I'll spare you the fluff and give you the highlights, because I swear I can still hear her voice in every line. I was creating resentment in the family. I was playing favorites and showing blatant disregard for her kids. I was dooming Lily and Josh to crippling debt when I could easily prevent it. And the final blow, the line she ended with, "Real family doesn't draw lines. Real family supports each other equally." I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking. My chest was tight, my ears ringing. I could practically feel my blood pressure climbing. That was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because here's the thing, I had tried to be polite. At the barbecue, I was calm. On the phone with my dad, I was direct but not cruel. But this wasn't a conversation. This was an attack. This was Diane trying to rewrite the narrative and guilt me into submission. And I snapped. I wrote back, no fluff, no sugarcoating. I never offered to pay for your kids. They have another parent who should be contributing to their education. My money is mine to use as I see fit. And finally, the one that cut through everything. Real family keeps their promises. I made one to my siblings when I was barely out of college myself, and I've kept it. That's what real family does. I hit send, watched the little checkmark turn blue, and then I blocked her. My hands were still trembling, but for the first time in days, I felt this weird, quiet clarity, like I had finally slammed the door shut on the endless guilt tripping. A couple of hours later, my sister texted me. She must have heard from Dad or maybe seen something online, because her message was just a flood of crying emojis and then, "I hate that you're being treated this way. You've done so much for us. I don't know what I would have done without you." I could almost hear her voice breaking as I read it. Then my brother chimed in, short and to the point because that's who he is. "If Dad cuts you off, that's his loss, not ours." That one hit me hard, because for all the chaos swirling around me, for all the venom coming from Diane and the disappointment radiating from my dad, my siblings saw me. They remembered the nights when I kept the lights on. They remembered the promise, and they knew I kept it. It was the validation I didn't know I desperately needed. But here's the kicker. Blocking Diane didn't end things. If anything, it escalated them. Because suddenly, I wasn't just selfish in private. She made it her mission to paint me as the villain publicly. And the way she went about it, the audacity left me stunned. Within days, I found out Diane had gone beyond private messages. She was venting on Facebook, making veiled posts about certain people who abandon family and stepkids being treated like second-class citizens. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. And then the extended family started calling. Now it feels like I'm living in the middle of a Cold War. My dad hasn't spoken to me in a week. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive scene on anything I've sent. Just silence. It's almost worse than the yelling because at least when he was yelling, he was engaged. This silence feels calculated, punitive, like he's trying to make me squirm until I give in. My stepmom? She went nuclear. She unfriended me on every platform. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn of all places. She wiped me from her digital universe like I was some stranger who offended her at a PDA meeting. Honestly, I don't care about being unfriended, but it's the symbolism that stings. The complete cutoff. The "you're dead to me" energy of it all. My step-siblings haven't said a word. Not to me, not about me. Radio silence. I can't tell if it's because they're genuinely uncomfortable or because they've been told to stay out of it. Either way, I know they know. Everyone knows. The whispers have spread. Because here's the kicker. It didn't stay contained. Oh no. Somehow, surprise, surprise, my aunts and uncles have gotten involved. And they have opinions. I've gotten calls and messages from relatives I haven't spoken to in months. Some of them dripping with faux sympathy, others blunt and judgmental. The consensus from that camp? I'm heartless. I'm turning my back on family. I'm hoarding money while children suffer. Do you know how insane that feels? To be branded selfish for keeping a promise? For literally paying tens of thousands out of my own pocket so my siblings wouldn't drown in debt. Something nobody ever did for me? When I point that out, when I remind them that Dad never lifted a finger for me, they wave it away. That's in the past. You're successful now. You should rise above it. It makes me want to scream, because what they're really saying is, your trauma doesn't count, your sacrifices don't count, your boundaries don't count. Just shut up and keep giving. The worst part is, I've started doubting myself. Not because I think I'm wrong. I know I'm not. But because the constant noise, the guilt-tripping, the twisted accusations, they wear on you. They seep in, and suddenly you're lying awake at night thinking, am I really heartless? Did I cross some invisible line? I keep circling back to one thing my mom said, though. She looked me dead in the eye the other night and said, "You did nothing wrong. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're selfish for honoring your word. Your father failed you. You didn't fail anyone." My sister texted me again this morning. Just a simple, "I love you. Thank you for keeping your promise." And my brother, in his blunt, no-nonsense way, added, "If Dad wants to lose you over this, that's on him, not you." Those two are the reason I made the promise in the first place. They're the reason I've been grinding, sacrificing, and planning all these years. And they're the reason I know deep down that I'm not the villain Diane wants everyone to believe I am. Still, the doubt lingers, because now I'm stuck here, staring at this fractured family, wondering if I really am the asshole. Am I wrong for drawing a line? For saying, I'll take care of the siblings I promised, but I won't shoulder the responsibility for kids who have their own father? Am I really the asshole for refusing to be guilt-tripped into fixing my dad's financial mess when he never once showed up for me? Or am I just finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough? So Reddit, aita for paying my siblings' tuition, but refusing to pay for my dad's wife's kids?
ATA for exposing my mom at her birthday party? Hi Reddit. Buckle up, because this one's messy. I honestly don't even know if I'm writing this to get validation, or if I just need to unload the years of frustration that have been building up. Either way, this is about my mom, Linda, her 50th birthday party, and the absolute circus she turned it into. I'm 24F, and I've always had, let's just say, a complicated relationship with my mom. Complicated in the way that living with her often felt like a full-time job, walking on eggshells, keeping her happy, managing her moods, and never being allowed to forget that her image was more important than my feelings. My mom, Linda, has always been obsessed with appearances. Not just in the regular, likes to dress nice way, but in the every single part of her life has to look like a curated Instagram feed kind of way. Designer clothes, fancy dinners, a house that always had to look like a magazine spread, even if we were broke underneath it all. She loved being the perfect hostess. People fawned over her ability to throw elegant parties with color-coordinated napkins, signature cocktails, and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And for as long as I can remember, I was a prop in all of this. The well-dressed daughter, The polite child who was told exactly how to behave, what to say, what to wear, because if I slipped up, if I acted too shy or stumbled over my words, she'd scold me later. And the worst part? She constantly reminded me that I was the reason she lost her body. I grew up hearing things like, if it wasn't for you, I'd still have a model's figure. Or, you stretched me out and ruined me. Imagine being a little kid and having your own mom treat your very existence like a crime against her beauty. By the time I was a teenager, I stopped even trying to impress her. I wore thrifted clothes. I dyed my hair purple for a year just because I knew it annoyed her, and I started eating dinner in my room to avoid her constant critiques. But she always had a trump card, comparison. Because when I was 16, my dad remarried. And his new wife, aka my stepmom, was only 8 years older than me. Yep, you read that right. My stepmom, Claire, is 32 now. She and I could pass for sisters, and sometimes people even think I'm older. And my mom never misses a chance to remind me. It's always, look at Claire, she takes care of herself. She's toned, she's put together. Why can't you be more like her? Never mind the fact that Claire is literally married to my dad and has an entirely different lifestyle. No, in my mom's world, Claire is the gold standard, and I'm the failure. Fast forward to this year. My mom was turning 50, and of course, she wasn't going to let it pass quietly. She threw herself a massive birthday bash. I'm talking 200 guests, live band, open bar, catering staff, ice sculptures, even a chocolate fountain. She rented out this fancy event space that looked like something straight out of a wedding magazine. And the way she talked about it, you'd think it was the royal coronation. For months leading up to it, she was planning outfits, getting Botox touch-ups, doing crash diets. She'd call me to complain about the horrors of aging, and then immediately pivot into bragging about how she was going to look better than half the 20-year-olds there. Now here's where things really start to spiral. A week before the party, she calls me and says, "Sweetheart, I need you to give a speech. It would make me look good if my daughter honored me in front of everyone. Notice the wording, make her look good. Not because she wanted to hear something heartfelt from me. Not because she thought it would be meaningful. No, it was about optics." I literally said, "Mom, I don't even know what I'd say." And she goes, "Just talk about how fabulous I am. You're a writer, aren't you? Use your skills for something useful." For context, I do some freelance writing and content creation, and she's always belittled it, calls it my little hobby. But now suddenly, she wanted those skills to make her the star of her own show. I tried to get out of it. I told her public speaking makes me nervous, that I didn't want to be the center of attention, that maybe she could ask one of her friends. But she guilt-tripped me hard. "Do you want to humiliate me in front of my friends? Everyone's expecting you to speak. People will think it's weird if you don't." She even brought up Claire. I bet if she were my daughter, she'd jump at the chance to honor me. That one stung. Because Claire is sweet, and I actually like her, but my mom weaponizes her existence against me every chance she gets. So I caved. I said fine, I'd do it. But deep down, I knew this was a disaster waiting to happen. The night finally came. I showed up in a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but nice enough that I wouldn't embarrass her. My mom, of course, was decked out in a sparkly gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She had her hair professionally styled, a full face of glam makeup, and she was absolutely basking in the attention. She worked the room like a politician, air-kissing everyone, laughing too loudly, making sure the photographers, yes, she hired photographers, got her good angles. When I walked in, she immediately pulled me aside. "Don't forget, you're speaking after dinner. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and make me sound good." I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. Dinner was extravagant, steak, lobster, multiple courses. The wine was flowing, the music was perfect, and my mom looked like she was having the time of her life. And then, the moment came. The band stopped playing, the lights dimmed slightly, and the MC announced, "Now, Linda's daughter would like to say a few words." Every single pair of eyes in that room turned to me. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I stood up, clutching the little note cards I had scribbled some ideas on. The thing about my mom is that she thrives on attention the way most people thrive on oxygen. She doesn't just like compliments, she lives for them. They fuel her. And at her 50th birthday bash, she was practically overdosing. Everywhere I looked, people were gushing over her. Linda, you look incredible. 50? You could pass for 35. What's your secret? You're glowing. Honestly, you're the kind of woman we all aspire to be. It was endless. Compliment after compliment, delivered with glasses of champagne clinking and fake laughter echoing through the room. And my mom? She ate it up like candy. She did that thing she always does, pressing her hand dramatically to her chest like she's just so humbled, while simultaneously smirking in a way that said, "Of course I look this good. I'm Linda." And the thing is, she did look good. I'll give her that. The gown sparkled under the chandelier lights. Her hair had more volume than I've ever seen, and her skin practically glowed from whatever treatments she'd had done. She wasn't just the star of the party, she was the entire solar system. But standing there, watching everyone orbit her, I couldn't help feeling invisible. Like I always have. Just before my speech, as the MC was preparing to bring everyone's attention to the stage, my mom pulled me aside. She leaned down, smiling sweetly for the cameras nearby, but her words were sharp enough to cut. Keep it short. Don't say anything embarrassing. And remember, this is MY night, not yours. That stung. I could feel my throat tighten, my stomach twist. Because she wasn't just reminding me, it felt like she was warning me. Like I was some unruly child who couldn't be trusted not to ruin her carefully constructed image. And here's the kicker, I knew something. Something she's been hiding for years. Something that could shatter this perfect little world she's built around herself. I had never planned to say anything. Honestly, I never wanted to. But the way she looked at me like I was just another accessory to her outfit made the thought creep into my head for the very first time. What if I told the truth? So there I was, waiting for my turn, clutching my note cards, trying to keep my hands from shaking. People were still giving speeches, friends, coworkers, a couple of cousins. All of them full of glowing praise. Linda is the best friend anyone could ask for. Linda is the life of every party. Linda has a heart of gold. Each one made her beam brighter. And then it happened. One of her friends, already tipsy from the open bar, grabbed the microphone and slurred, "Linda, you're the kind of mom every girl dreams of having." The room erupted in laughter and applause. My mom tilted her head back and smirked like a queen accepting her crown. And I snapped. Something inside me cracked wide open. All the years of being told I ruined her body. All the times she compared me to Claire. All the moments she reminded me that I was never good enough, never pretty enough, never perfect enough for her world. And now this, people praising her as the dream mom. I couldn't do it anymore. When the MC finally called me up, I walked to the front of the room, my heels clicking against the polished floor, my palms sweating so hard I thought the note cards might disintegrate. I looked out at the sea of faces, 200 guests, all staring at me with polite expectation. And then I looked at my mom, sitting front and center, eyes gleaming, waiting for me to make her look good. And instead of reading what I'd written, I put the cards down. "Hi, everyone," I started, my voice shaking slightly. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Linda's daughter." There was a ripple of polite chuckles, a couple of nods. My mom gave me her rehearsed smile, the one that said, "Keep going, darling, but don't screw this up." And I took a deep breath. You've all been saying tonight that my mom is glamorous, that she's youthful, that she's the kind of mom every girl dreams of having. The crowd laughed again. My mom smirked even wider. And then I added, "But I think sometimes what people see on the outside doesn't always match what happens behind closed doors." The room went dead silent. I swear you could hear a pin drop. My mom's smile faltered, just slightly. Her eyes narrowed, and I could practically feel her willing me to stop. But once I started, I couldn't. Growing up, my mom taught me a lot. She taught me how to smile even when I wasn't happy. She taught me how to dress so other people would approve. She taught me how to keep secrets. And she taught me that appearances are everything. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw her friends exchange nervous glances. My mom's hand gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles turning white. I could have stopped there. I could have backpedaled, turned it into some sappy Hallmark ending about how I still loved her anyway. That's what she expected. But instead, I looked straight at her and said, "And you know what? I'm tired of keeping secrets." I didn't say it yet. I didn't drop the actual bombshell. But I saw the panic flash across her face. She knew exactly what secret I was talking about. And that tiny flicker of fear in her eyes, it was intoxicating. For once, the power shifted. For once, she wasn't the one in control. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The photographers stopped snapping. Even the band members, who had been packing up quietly in the corner, froze to watch. All eyes were on me, and I had a choice. Do I keep going and burn everything down? Or do I let her keep her little empire intact? I looked at her. She was smiling again, but it wasn't the confident smirk from before. It was tight, strained, like she was begging me silently to behave. The funny thing about public speaking is that the silence always feels louder than the words. When I stood there, champagne glass in hand, I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes pressing into me. The chandeliers glittered above, the air smelled faintly of champagne and lobster, and my mom's glittery gown sparkled as she perched on the edge of her seat, waiting to be worshipped. I started nice, like I was supposed to. "Happy 50th, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "You look amazing tonight." Polite applause followed. She beamed, the photographers clicked, and for a split second, everything seemed fine. Then I paused, and I said the words that changed everything. "I just hope everyone here realizes appearances can be deceiving." A murmur spread through the room. People tilted their heads, confused. I took a deep breath, because while Mom is smiling for you all, she's been secretly using my college fund to pay for her plastic surgeries. Gasps, actual gasps, rippled across the room like a wave. Champagne glasses froze midair. Someone coughed loudly. And my mom, Linda, the queen of composure, the woman who could fake a smile in any situation, froze. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes widened, and then her face went stiff, like a porcelain doll about to crack. I'll never forget the sound that followed. It wasn't just silence, it was silence plus the whispers. People leaning into each other, hissing. Did she say plastic surgery? Her daughter's college fund? Wait, is that true? One of my mom's friends, the same one who had drunkenly called her the dream mom, nearly choked on her drink. Even the band members, who had been halfway out the door, stopped and stared. And me? My hands were trembling so badly that champagne sloshed over the rim of my glass. But I kept going. "Sweetheart," my mom said, her voice strained, but loud enough for the microphone to catch. "That's a very funny joke." She laughed. A brittle, glass-shattering laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Always the comedian. But no one laughed with her. Not a single soul. I raised my eyebrow. Is it though? Funny? Because it stopped being funny the day I found out I'd been accepted into my dream school and my tuition money had mysteriously vanished. Another gasp. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." My mom's hands clenched around the armrests of her chair. She looked like she was about to lunge at me, but she was trapped. Every camera, every guest, every eye locked onto her. "You've all been telling my mom tonight how youthful she looks," I continued, my voice steadier now. "Well, here's the secret. Youth costs money. Money that wasn't hers to spend. Money she promised me for college." I could hear the whispers growing louder now. Botox, tummy tuck, implants, facelift. Each word ricocheted through the crowd like bullets. "Do you know what it feels like," I asked the room, "to get an acceptance letter to a school you've dreamed of for years, only to realize your mom stole your chance at a future so she could look good in cocktail dresses?" My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. She always told me appearances were everything. And I guess now you all know the price of that. My mom shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward. "That is not true," she shrieked. Her voice echoed, raw and desperate, no longer polished. "She's exaggerating. She's lying." But her voice wavered. And that was all it took. Because in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was written all over her face. The panic, the fury, the desperation, it screamed guilt. People didn't know where to look. Some stared at me with wide eyes, others at my mom with horror. A few of her so-called friends had already pulled out their phones, thumbs flying across screens. No doubt, the gossip mill was already turning. One of my aunts whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, so that's how she's been affording all those procedures. Another guest muttered, "I always wondered how she managed all this." The whispers grew louder, the murmurs swelling until it felt like the whole room was buzzing. And my mom? She was crumbling before my eyes. "You ungrateful brat," she screamed at me, her perfectly applied lipstick trembling with every word. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" By humiliating me on my birthday, her voice cracked. She was no longer Linda, the glamorous queen of the night. She was just a woman caught in her own lies. And for once, nobody rushed to comfort her. Nobody swooped in to smooth things over. I looked at her, at the stunned faces around the room, and said, quietly but firmly, "I didn't humiliate you, Mom. You did that to yourself." Then I set down the microphone, placed my half-empty champagne glass on the nearest table, and walked away. Behind me, the room erupted. Some guests tried to console my mom, others avoided her completely. A few actually applauded me, though it was hesitant, scattered. And as I pushed open the doors to leave, I could still hear her voice shrieking my name, begging me to come back, promising it wasn't true, threatening me in the same breath. But I didn't stop. For the first time in my life, I had finally taken the power back. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because once you rip the mask off someone like my mom, they don't just quietly put it back on. They come for you. And I had no idea just how ugly her revenge was about to get. The moment the words left my mouth, I thought the room couldn't get any quieter. But I was wrong. Because when my mom's best friends gasped, when my stepmom literally spit her drink across the tablecloth, and when my dad went pale like he'd seen a ghost, suddenly, the silence wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating. People didn't even bother whispering discreetly anymore. Wait, didn't she brag about paying for her daughter's degree? She said she was so proud of setting aside money for college. Oh my God, $60,000. I heard the words like daggers thrown across the room. My mom's empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing in real time, under the weight of every lie she'd ever told. My mom stood, her chair screeching backward across the polished floor. She looked like a woman possessed, glittering gown and all. "You liar," she shrieked, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me." Her voice was raw, not the polished hostess tone she always used. It was jagged, ugly, desperate. "You're jealous. That's all this is," she screamed. "Jealous of me. Jealous of Claire. You've always been bitter, always trying to drag me down." The crowd recoiled. Her friends, who once worshipped her, now looked at her like she was a stranger. And then, out of nowhere, my dad spoke. At first it was quiet, almost too quiet. She's not lying. Every head turned. My dad's face was pale, his jaw tight, but his voice carried through the stunned silence. "I found out weeks ago. Linda drained the account we set aside for her tuition. $60,000. Gone. Liposuction. Botox. A so-called wellness retreat in Bali." Another collective gasp swept through the room. Cameras clicked. Phones raised higher. This wasn't just gossip anymore, it was evidence. Proof. My stepmom, Claire, covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head in disbelief. "Linda, how could you?" she whispered, but it was loud enough to carry. The room descended into chaos. Some guests scrambled for the exits, eager to escape the scene. Others huddled together in shocked clusters, whispering furiously. A few of my mom's so-called best friends had their phones held high, recording the entire meltdown. I knew those videos would hit social media before the night was even over. The glamorous Linda, queen of appearances, exposed in 4K. My mom's screams grew louder, more unhinged. "You traitor," she howled at my dad. "You're just trying to make me look bad in front of everyone. You never supported me, never loved me, and now you're teaming up with them against me." She flung her champagne glass, and it shattered against the wall, spraying shards and liquid across the floor. People gasped and ducked. Her friends, at least, The ones still brave enough to stay were no longer on her side. "I can't believe this," one woman muttered, shaking her head. "She lied to all of us," another added. $60,000 for vanity? Every judgmental word landed like a stone, piling onto the wreckage of her reputation. My mom, who had lived her entire life for admiration, was now drowning in disgust. For years, my dad had let her control the narrative. He'd been quiet, detached, almost cowardly when it came to confronting her. But tonight, something in him snapped too. "You humiliated yourself, Linda," he said firmly, his voice cutting through her screams. "Not her. Not me. You." His words hit harder than mine ever could, because for once, the man she'd always dismissed as weak was standing tall, and he wasn't protecting her anymore. Guests began leaving in waves. High heels clicking across the floor, muttered excuses about early mornings and needing to get home. But I knew the truth. Nobody wanted to be associated with the fallout. By the time half the room had cleared, the perfect party looked like a battlefield. Abandoned champagne flutes littered the tables, napkins lay crumpled on the floor, and the band quietly slipped out the side door without playing another note. My mom stood in the middle of it all, glittering and furious, screaming into the void as the audience she lived for vanished before her eyes. One of her friends, a woman she'd bragged about vacationing with in Italy, looked at her with pure disgust and said, "You know, Linda, I think your daughter's braver than you've ever been." And then she walked out too. My mom's face twisted into something I can only describe as monstrous. She looked at me, eyes blazing, and hissed, "You will regret this." Her voice was low, guttural, filled with venom. And in that moment, I knew she meant it. By the time I left, the grand ballroom that had once been packed with adoring guests was nearly empty. Just my mom, pacing and muttering, her makeup streaking down her face, her tiara of confidence shattered. My dad walked me out. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, something I hadn't seen him do in years. "I should have told you sooner," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I thought I could fix it, but she's been spiraling for a long time." Claire touched my shoulder gently. "You were brave," she said softly. "Painful, but brave." And as I climbed into the Uber that night, my phone already buzzing with notifications from people who had seen the videos spreading like wildfire, I realized something chilling. That wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of my mom's revenge. I thought the chaos ended when I walked out of that ballroom, but I was wrong. If anything, the real storm hit the next day. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Texts from relatives, DMs from friends, missed calls from unknown numbers. And then the videos. Clips from the party were already circulating on Facebook and TikTok. There I was, holding a champagne glass, exposing my mom's secret in front of 200 guests. There she was, screaming like a... "She's crossed the line," he said, jaw clenched. Draining the college fund was bad enough. But identity theft? This is criminal. My stepmom Claire immediately pulled up a list of lawyers. "You're not alone," she promised. "We're going to help you fight this." And for once, I actually believed her. But of course, my extended family had other opinions. My aunt called me and said, "How could you do that to your mother? You embarrassed her in front of everyone." Another relative texted, "Air your grievances in private, not in public. You ruined her 50th. Even my grandmother, who knows firsthand how vain my mom can be, shook her head and said, "She shouldn't have done what she did, but you didn't need to humiliate her." Families keep things behind closed doors. Behind closed doors. The phrase I'd heard my entire life. But you know what? Behind closed doors is how abusers thrive. Behind closed doors is how my mom thought she could keep stealing, keep lying, keep manipulating without consequence. I wasn't going to be her scapegoat anymore. Meanwhile, my mom went full PR mode. She called relatives crying, claiming I ruined her life. She told anyone who would listen that I was an ungrateful, jealous daughter who hated seeing her mom happy. She painted me as the villain who plotted to humiliate her on the most important night of her life. And some people bought it. They always do, because she's good at playing victim when it suits her. But the videos? The evidence? The fact that my dad openly confirmed it? Those things don't lie. With my dad and stepmom's help, I started consulting a lawyer. We're exploring charges for identity theft and fraud. At the very least, I need to repair my credit score and prevent her from doing this again. It feels surreal. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to take legal action against my own mother. But here we are. And the scariest part? She's doubling down. She left me a voicemail saying, if you take me to court, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Empty threat or not, it chilled me to my core. So here I am, sitting in the wreckage of my mom's empire. Her friendships? Shattered. Her reputation? Tarnished. Her family relationships? Hanging by a thread. And me? I'm left wondering if I went too far. Because yes, she deserved to be exposed. Yes, she stole from me, lied to me, and sabotaged my future. But part of me can't shake the guilt. That I didn't just confront her privately. That I did it in front of 200 people. That I turned her own birthday party into the stage for her downfall. So now, I ask you, Reddit, am I the asshole for exposing my mom in front of everyone? Or was it the only way to finally stop her from hiding behind appearances? ATA for refusing to marry into a billionaire family? So, buckle up because this story is not what I expected to be telling when I first agreed to date Adam. I, 27F, have been dating my boyfriend, Adam, 29M, for about 3 years. We met in the most ordinary, rom-com but realistic way possible through mutual friends at a casual rooftop party. I still remember that night so vividly. It was summer, humid but breezy, and someone had strung fairy lights across the rooftop like we were in some low-budget indie film. I was there mostly for the snacks and free sangria, when this tall guy with kind eyes and a shy smile asked me if I wanted the last spring roll. That guy was Adam. At first, Adam came across as normal. Maybe even a little boring compared to the usual flashy guys I dated in my mid-20s. He didn't talk about himself much. He asked a lot of questions, listened intently, and had this way of making you feel like the only person in the room when he looked at you. It wasn't until we'd been seeing each other for a couple months that I realized something a little odd. He never mentioned his family. Like, ever. At first, I didn't think too much of it. Everyone has family drama, right? My parents divorced when I was 13, so I get it. Some people just don't want to unpack all that emotional baggage early in a relationship. But over time, it became clear that Adam's avoidance of the family topic wasn't just casual, it was deliberate. If I asked where he grew up, he'd give vague answers like, oh, here and there, we moved around a lot. If I asked about siblings, he'd smile and say, yeah, I've got some, but we're not super close. If I asked about holidays, he'd dodge entirely, usually changing the subject or distracting me with something else. After a while, I stopped pressing. We had such a good thing going, and I figured he'd open up when he was ready. Fast forward 3 years, and we were solid. We'd weathered the usual ups and downs, supported each other through job changes, bad colds, and the pandemic. I'd met his friends, his coworkers, even his college roommate, and everyone seemed to genuinely like him. But the topic of family remained locked in this invisible vault. Then, out of nowhere, Adam dropped a bomb. One random Tuesday night, we were eating Thai takeout on the couch, me in an old hoodie, him scrolling through his phone, and he casually said, "So, my cousin's wedding is coming up overseas. I think it's time you meet my family. Wanna come?" I swear I almost choked on my pad thai. It was so abrupt, so unlike him, that I just stared at him for a full 5 seconds. Wait, you have a cousin? You have a family? You want me to meet them? I half joked. He laughed nervously, like he knew exactly how weird this was, and said, yeah, there, complicated. But I think it's time. I didn't need more convincing. Of course I said yes. This felt huge, like a milestone moment in our relationship. Finally, after years of waiting, I'd get to see the mysterious, complicated family Adam had been hiding. And oh my God, I was not ready. From the moment we landed overseas, everything felt off. Not bad off, but surreal off. First, there was a driver waiting for us at the airport. Not just some guy in a black sedan, but a full-on chauffeur holding a little sign with Adam's last name on it. The car wasn't just a car, it was a gleaming, luxury vehicle with tinted windows and buttery leather seats. I shot Adam a look, and he just shrugged, like this was no big deal. Meanwhile, I was sitting there wondering why my boyfriend, who lived in a very average one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint on the ceiling, had a private driver picking him up overseas. Then we pulled up to where we'd be staying. And when I say estate, I don't mean a mansion. I mean an estate. Acres of manicured gardens, fountains, wrought iron gates taller than my old apartment building. The kind of place that looked like it belonged in a history book or a period drama on Netflix. The car glided up a circular driveway paved with actual cobblestones, and there it was, a palace. A literal palace. I remember gripping Adam's hand and whispering, "What the hell is this?" He squeezed my hand back, gave me this sheepish look, and said the words that would change everything. I guess I should have mentioned, my family's well, they're not just wealthy. They're billionaire wealthy. I thought he was joking at first. I even laughed. But when I saw the staff lined up at the entrance, actual staff, like a welcoming committee straight out of Downton Abbey, I realized he was dead serious. Billionaires. As in, money I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around. That was the moment my world tilted. If I thought the estate itself was overwhelming, the first dinner with Adam's family was the moment I realized I was stepping into a completely different universe, one where I didn't belong. Let me set the scene. The dining room looked like something you'd see in a movie about royalty. The table was absurdly long, so long that if Adam sat at one end and I at the other, we'd need microphones just to have a conversation. The ceiling was painted with murals of cherubs and clouds, like a mini Sistine Chapel. Gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses, candles that looked like they cost more than my monthly rent. And hovering around us were at least 6 servers in crisp uniforms, silently topping off wine and water like we were at a Michelin-starred restaurant. And then there was Eleanor, Adam's mother. She was impeccably dressed, every hair in place, makeup flawless in that way only old money women seem to pull off. Minimal, subtle, but somehow radiating power. Her jewelry wasn't flashy, but you could tell it was the kind of heirloom passed down for generations, each piece carrying centuries of wealth and influence. At first, she smiled at me politely. Too politely. It wasn't warm, it was calculation. Like she'd already decided who I was and was just waiting for me to prove her right. We sat down and immediately, she started with the questions. "What do your parents do?" she asked casually, sipping her wine. I froze for a second. My dad's a mechanic, my mom's a nurse. Honest, hard-working people. But in that dining room, surrounded by oil paintings of ancestors who probably signed treaties or owned shipping empires, I suddenly felt like saying blue collar was going to sound like admitting I was from another planet. "They work in healthcare and automotive," I said carefully, trying to keep it neutral. Her lips pursed, just slightly. "And where did you attend school?" she asked next, like she was ticking boxes off a list. I swallowed. "I went to a state university, worked part-time jobs to pay my way, graduated with student loans I'm still paying off." Meanwhile, I already knew from Adam that his family members all went to Ivy League schools or elite institutions abroad. "I went to state," I said, forcing a smile. "I studied communications." Another slight purse of the lips. Then came the kicker. "What exactly do you bring to this family?" she asked, tilting her head, her tone sweet but dripping with venom. I swear the air left my lungs. It wasn't just a question. It was a test. And everyone at that table knew it. I tried to answer politely. I mumbled something about supporting Adam, about building a future together. But every word felt flimsy under her gaze. She wasn't asking because she wanted to know me. She was asking because she wanted me to know I wasn't enough. At one point, I glanced around, desperate for backup. Adam was sitting beside me, his jaw tight, eyes darting between his mother and me. He looked like he wanted to jump in, but something held him back. Maybe respect, maybe fear, maybe both. And then, out of nowhere, one of his cousins leaned toward me, pretending to ask for the salt, and whispered under their breath, "She's testing if you're worthy." The words chilled me. So this wasn't casual conversation, it was initiation. A twisted rite of passage. By dessert, things went from bad to brutal. Eleanor didn't bother with subtlety anymore. She set down her fork, dabbed her lips with her napkin, and looked me dead in the eye. Adam deserves someone who understands the weight of this legacy, she said smoothly, like she was announcing the weather. You don't. Silence. The entire table froze. Even the servers paused mid-step. My face burned hot. I wanted to shrink into my chair, disappear under the tablecloth, run out into the gardens, and never come back. But at the same time, a tiny part of me burned with anger. Who was she to decide what I was worthy of? Who was she to look at me, someone who'd built her life from scratch, who'd worked hard for everything, and dismiss me like I was nothing? I glanced at Adam again, praying he'd say something. Anything. Defend me. But he just stared at his plate. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a war. I thought dinner with Eleanor was going to be the low point of this entire trip. I was wrong. So wrong. Because if there's one thing worse than being told to your face that you're not worthy of your boyfriend, it's finding out that his ex is not only still in the picture, but also adored by his entire family. It all started the morning of the wedding festivities. The family estate was buzzing like a hive, caterers rushing in and out, florists carrying towering arrangements of white orchids, staff setting up massive tents on the lawn. Everywhere I turned, there were designer gowns, whispered gossip, champagne glasses clinking before it was even noon. It was like stepping into a scene from Crazy Rich Asians, only I wasn't Rachel Chu. I didn't have charm and confidence on my side. I had jet lag, a dress from Nordstrom Rack, and a growing pit in my stomach. And then she appeared. Her name was Victoria. I'll never forget the moment she walked in. She glided across the marble foyer like she owned it, air-kissing relatives left and right, her laugh echoing through the halls. She was tall, elegant, with the kind of beauty that didn't need makeup, but had it anyway, perfectly applied. Her dress looked like it came straight off a Paris runway. Her jewelry wasn't just expensive, it was ancestral, the kind that said, I don't need to try, I was born into this. And Eleanor? Oh, Eleanor lit up like a Christmas tree the second Victoria arrived. Darling, Eleanor exclaimed, embracing her like she was the daughter she never had. I'm so glad you could make it. You've been such a part of this family. Those words hit me like a slap. Such a part of this family. I stood there, clutching my tiny clutch bag, invisible. What I didn't know until later was that Victoria wasn't just Adam's ex. She was the ex. The long-term, everyone approved, perfect match ex. The one who'd been groomed, apparently, to take over the role of Adam's partner in this billion-dollar dynasty. And judging by the way Eleanor couldn't stop glowing every time Victoria spoke, that plan hadn't died yet. The first real punch to the gut came when I accidentally overheard a conversation. It was later that afternoon, during one of the endless pre-wedding events. I had ducked away to grab some fresh air, weaving through the manicured hedges when I caught voices. Eleanor and Victoria. I froze. I know eavesdropping is wrong, but something in Eleanor's tone made me stop. She's nice, Eleanor said, though her voice dripped with disdain. But she doesn't understand this life. Not like you. Victoria gave a soft, pitying laugh. Don't worry. I'll fix this. He'll come back to his senses. My heart plummeted. I pressed my back against the hedge, every nerve in my body screaming. Fix this? Like I was a problem to be solved. Like my entire relationship was a mistake she was graciously going to correct. I should have confronted them right then and there, stormed out and demanded answers. But instead, I slinked back to my room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely text. When I finally told Adam what I'd heard, hoping he would validate me, maybe even get angry on my behalf, he didn't. He brushed it off. Babe, you're overthinking it, he said, sitting casually on the edge of the bed, scrolling on his phone like this was nothing. Victoria's just close with the family. That's all. You're being paranoid. Paranoid. That word sliced through me. After everything, after Eleanor's interrogation, after being humiliated at dinner, after overhearing his ex literally plot to win him back, he thought I was just being insecure. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not Eleanor's cruelty, not Victoria's smug confidence, but the fact that Adam, the man I loved and trusted, didn't have my back. That night, as the estate glittered with laughter, music, and wealth, I sat alone in my room, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror, wondering if I was fighting a battle I could never win. The wedding itself was the kind of spectacle people write articles about. Every detail was so polished, so extravagant. It felt more like a royal coronation than two people getting married. White roses covered every surface, a string quartet played under crystal chandeliers, and every guest looked like they'd stepped out of the pages of Vogue. I'd tried my best to blend in. I wore the nicest dress I owned, spent hours perfecting my hair and makeup, and plastered on a smile, even though inside, I was a storm. Between Eleanor's constant disapproval and Victoria's shadow hanging over me, I was already on edge. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Halfway through the reception, Adam took my hand. His grip was firm, almost nervous. "Come with me," he whispered. My stomach flipped. His eyes were serious, his jaw tight. He led me through the maze of tables, past laughing guests, past the towering cake and overflowing champagne towers, until we stopped in a small clearing just beside the dance floor. And that's when I saw it. The small, velvet box in his hand. My heart plummeted. My palms went clammy. The room around me blurred, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. He was going to propose. Right there. In front of everyone. "My name," Adam said, his voice trembling just slightly. "These past 3 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved, without conditions, without expectations. I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you?" But I didn't hear the rest, because over his shoulder, I saw her. Eleanor. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed tightly, eyes locked on me with that same piercing glare she'd given me since the first night. Her lips were pressed into the faintest of smirks, like she was daring me to say yes. Daring me to defy her, knowing exactly what it would cost. And in that frozen moment, the weight of everything came crashing down. If I said yes, I wouldn't just be accepting Adam. I'd be accepting all of them, Eleanor's scrutiny, the family's constant judgment, Victoria's smug presence, the unspoken rule that I would never, ever truly belong. I'd be binding myself to a legacy that viewed me as an outsider, a charity case, someone to be tolerated but never embraced. If I said no, I'd lose the man I loved, the one person who made me feel safe in this gilded cage of a world. It was a no-win choice. I felt the room closing in, eyes turning toward us as guests realized what was happening. The music softened, conversations hushed. This wasn't just a proposal, it was a public performance. And everyone was waiting to see if I was the girl who'd be accepted into the dynasty, or the one who'd be cast out. My throat went dry. I looked at Adam, sweet, nervous Adam, holding that box like it contained the universe, and then back at Eleanor, whose eyes were practically drilling into my skull. And before I could stop myself, before I could talk myself out of it, the words tumbled out. I can't. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that swallowed the entire room. The string quartet faltered. A glass clinked somewhere in the distance. And Adam's face, oh God, his face crumpled in confusion and pain. "You can't," he repeated, his voice cracking. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I love you, Adam. I do. But I can't marry into a family that doesn't want me. I can't say yes knowing that every step of our future would be a fight just to prove I belong." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Somewhere behind me, I swear I heard Victoria's soft, triumphant laugh. And Eleanor? She didn't flinch. She just stood there, her expression unreadable, like she'd been expecting this outcome all along. Adam's hand shook as he snapped the velvet box shut. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked at me not with love, but with betrayal. And in that moment, surrounded by glittering wealth, diamond chandeliers, and people who'd never know what it meant to feel small, I realized I'd just shattered not only his heart, but maybe mine too. The fallout was immediate. When I said no, it was like someone had detonated a bomb in the middle of the reception. Gasps echoed around the ballroom. Forks clattered onto plates. I could hear the whispers already starting, rippling across the room like wildfire. She turned him down? Wasn't she after his money? Typical, gold digger didn't get her way. The words sliced through me even though they weren't said to my face. My cheeks burned, and I suddenly felt painfully aware of my cheap dress, my shaking hands, the fact that I didn't belong in this world to begin with. And then Eleanor. I'll never forget her expression. While Adam stood there, crushed, his shoulders stiff and his eyes glassy, Eleanor allowed herself the faintest smile. A tiny, satisfied smirk. The look of someone who'd just won a war without lifting a finger. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to humiliate me further. That one smirk said it all. I told you so. You don't belong here. Adam slipped the velvet box back into his pocket. His face was pale, and when he finally looked at me, the love I'd always seen in his eyes had been replaced with something else. Hurt. Betrayal. Maybe even disgust. He didn't say a word, just turned on his heel and walked away. I wanted to run after him, to explain, to scream that it wasn't about money or fear or insecurity, that it was about survival, about not wanting to spend my life suffocating under Eleanor's shadow. But my feet felt rooted to the floor, like the weight of every stair in that room had pinned me down. The rest of the night was a blur. Guests whispered and pointed. Victoria, of course, was suddenly glued to Adam's side, whispering in his ear, her hand lingering on his arm like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Eleanor floated through the crowd like a queen surveying her conquered kingdom. And me? I was invisible. Or worse, hidden. But here's the twist. The morning after the wedding, when I was packing my things, desperate to get out of that suffocating palace, someone knocked on my door. It was Adam's father. I hadn't spoken much to him during the trip. He was quiet, reserved, always sitting a bit apart during meals. He carried himself with dignity, but there was a heaviness about him, like he was permanently weighed down by something unseen. "May I come in?" he asked gently. I nodded, bracing myself. I expected him to scold me, to tell me how badly I'd embarrassed the family, how much pain I'd caused his son. Instead, he closed the door softly and let out a long sigh. "I wanted to tell you," he began, his voice low, "that I respect what you did last night." I blinked, stunned. Respect? I humiliated Adam. Everyone hates me right now. He shook his head. "No, what you did was brave." He stepped closer, his expression soft but firm. "Sometimes walking away is the bravest choice you can make. You may have just saved Adam from repeating history." His words hit me like a thunderclap. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wondered if this was just his quiet rebellion against Eleanor, a way of admitting his own regrets. But the truth in his eyes was undeniable. He wasn't just thanking me. He was warning me. When he left, I sat on the bed, staring at my half-packed suitcase, wondering how everything had spiraled so far. Now, here's where things stand. Adam is furious with me. He hasn't answered my calls or texts since that night. Eleanor is smug, probably planning the engagement party for Victoria as we speak. The guests will forever remember me as the outsider who dared to say no. And Adam's dad? He's the only one who quietly, sincerely thanked me. So here I am, thousands of miles away, back in my tiny apartment, asking Reddit. ATA for refusing to marry into a billionaire family? On one hand, I walked away from someone I loved deeply. I broke his heart, humiliated him in front of everyone, and maybe burned every bridge with his family. But on the other hand, would saying yes have been worse? Would I have condemned myself and Adam to a lifetime of Eleanor's control, her endless judgment, her unrelenting power games? I don't know. All I know is that when I looked at Adam that night, velvet box in hand and his mother's glare behind him, I saw not a proposal, but a prison sentence. And I just couldn't say yes. So, ATA?
AITA for exposing my dad's secret during family therapy? So, I, 17M, am stuck in what feels like a nightmare. My parents' divorce. And not just any divorce. No, theirs is the kind where everyone ends up with emotional bruises, and the kids, me and my little brother, 13M, are basically collateral damage. Let me paint the picture for you. My dad is the kind of guy who has built his entire identity around being the intellectual. He's a college professor, and if you think that sounds impressive, you'd probably change your mind after spending 5 minutes in a room with him. He doesn't talk to people, he lectures at them. Every conversation with him feels like a debate, and every opinion you have is automatically dismissed unless it lines up perfectly with his reasoned worldview. He'll correct your grammar in the middle of an emotional breakdown. He'll tell you how your feelings are not logically consistent. And he has this infuriating smirk when he thinks he's won, which is basically always, according to him. Now, my mom is the total opposite. Warm, outgoing, the type of person who remembers your favorite meal and makes it just to surprise you. She's the one who used to sit with me and my brother at the kitchen table, listening to us talk about our day, and somehow, she made the whole house feel alive. She was the glue, until she wasn't. One day, that glue just snapped. Years of being dismissed, condescended to, and made to feel like she was never enough finally caught up to her. And she filed for divorce. At first, I thought maybe they'd figure it out. Maybe this was one of those rough patches. But no. The moment Dad realized Mom was serious, the gloves came off. Dad sat me and my brother down one night in the living room. He poured himself a glass of scotch, because of course he did, that's his ritual. And in his most lecturer addressing the class tone, he told us, "Your mother is being selfish. She's ungrateful for everything I've provided. She doesn't understand the sacrifices I've made." Like, what was I supposed to say? Yes, Dad, you're right. Mom is terrible? I just sat there, staring at the rug, while my brother fidgeted with his hoodie strings. Then, a few days later, Mom pulled us aside in the kitchen. She was trying to stay calm, but her voice shook. "Your father, he's manipulative. He makes everything about himself. He's emotionally absent. I've been alone in this marriage for years." So there we were, me and my brother, basically referees at this heavyweight boxing match we never signed up for. Every day felt like we were being forced to pick sides. But then came the kicker. The court decided, in all its infinite wisdom, that what our family really needed was family therapy. Yeah. Family therapy. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where two people can't stand to breathe the same air, but imagine being locked in a room with them once a week while a stranger with a clipboard asks, "And how does that make you feel?" Yeah, right. First, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe the therapist would be one of those miracle workers who could snap their fingers and suddenly my dad would stop acting like an arrogant jerk and my mom wouldn't look like she was on the verge of tears all the time. Spoiler, that's not what happened. But before I even get into the therapy sessions, I should probably explain how bad things had gotten at home leading up to it, because otherwise you won't understand why I hated the idea so much. After Mom filed for divorce, the house basically became a war zone. Not with yelling, no, my dad doesn't yell. He's too above that. Instead, he weaponizes silence. Cold, calculated silence. He'd sit at the dinner table with his nose buried in some thick philosophy book, acting like Mom didn't exist. If she asked him to pass the salt, he'd pass it without looking at her, like she was some stranger he had to tolerate. Mom, on the other hand, would sigh loudly, slam cabinets when she cooked, and sometimes mutter under her breath things like, "Of course, why would I expect help?" Meanwhile, me and my brother just existed in the middle. I'd retreat to my room most nights, blasting music in my headphones to drown out the tension. My brother would camp out in the basement with video games, only coming up for snacks. It got to the point where even the dog, a golden retriever named Max, started acting weird. He'd sit between Mom and Dad on the couch, looking back and forth like he was the one supposed to keep the peace. The only time we felt normal was when Dad was at the university late and Mom would order pizza, and we'd sit on the floor watching movies. But even then, it felt fragile, like it could shatter if anyone breathed too loudly. So when the court ordered therapy, I just thought, great, now we get to drag all this out into the open, with a stranger watching. Walking into the therapist's office was surreal. It was one of those cozy places with soft lighting, shelves full of self-help books, and a box of tissues strategically placed in the middle of the coffee table, like they were expecting us to cry. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Sanders, smiled warmly as we sat down. She looked at me and my brother like we were the priority, which I appreciated, until my dad immediately hijacked the conversation. I think it's important to establish from the outset he began in his professor voice, "that this entire situation stems from your mother's impulsive decision-making and lack of gratitude." Mom's jaw clenched. "See what I mean? This is what I deal with." He twists everything. And just like that, round one began. Me and my brother sat there, silent, like spectators at a boxing match we didn't buy tickets for. Dr. Sanders tried to redirect, asking us how we felt, but Dad would interrupt to clarify the facts. Mom would roll her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. By the end of that first session, nothing had been solved. If anything, it felt worse, because now their resentment had been spoken out loud in front of us. And me, I walked out of there thinking, there is no way I can survive months of this. That's when I realized I was in the middle of something much bigger than just a family adjustment. Because family therapy wasn't just about us healing. It was about control. And I wasn't sure who was going to win. If part one sounded bad, buckle up, because the sessions quickly turned into a circus. Not the fun kind with clowns and cotton candy. More like the kind where the lions are starving, the ringmaster is drunk, and the audience is just praying nobody gets mauled. Every week, my dad walked into that softly lit office like it was his personal lecture hall. He'd sit straight-backed in the armchair, legs crossed, glasses perched on his nose, like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. My mom, on the other hand, sat perched at the edge of the couch, clutching tissues like they were weapons she might hurl across the room. And me, I sat in the middle, literally on the cushion between them like some unwilling referee. My brother took the farthest spot he could, practically melting into the armrest. His gaze fixed on the carpet like if he stared hard enough, he'd tunnel straight through the floor and escape. The first few sessions followed the same formula. Dad would use big words to make Mom sound small. Words like pedantic, histrionic, reactionary, stuff no one uses in normal conversation, but he wielded them like knives. Mom would either cry, her mascara smudging as she dabbed at her face, or she'd snap back, her voice sharp and trembling, and my brother would sit in silence, his shoelaces suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. The therapist, Dr. Sanders, tried her best. She really did, but it was like watching someone try to build a sandcastle while a tidal wave kept knocking it over. There was one session that sticks in my mind like it happened yesterday. Dr. Sanders decided to pivot away from the fighting and try something constructive. "Let's talk about role models," she said, smiling in that practiced therapist way. "Who do you each look up to?" Simple question, right? Except nothing is simple in my family. My brother went first. His voice was quiet, shaky, but clear enough. "Mom," because she listens. I swear, the room tilted for a second. Mom's eyes welled up instantly. She squeezed his hand, whispering, "Thank you, sweetheart." But Dad scoffed, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through the air. "That's because she doesn't have original thoughts of her own," he said, adjusting his glasses like he'd just made some brilliant point. Mom froze. For half a heartbeat, I thought she'd ignore it. But then she exploded. "Are you serious? Do you hear yourself? You're insulting me in front of our Dad's lips curved into that smug little half-smile that made my blood boil. "I'm merely pointing out facts. You equate listening with passivity. That's not a virtue." I jumped in before it turned into a shouting match. "Stop! Both of you, just stop!" Dr. Sanders held up her hands, her face tight, like she wanted hazard pay for this gig. "Let's take a deep breath. Everyone, please." But the damage was done. Mom was shaking. Dad was smug. My brother looked like he wanted to disappear. And me? My chest felt like it was caving in. Because while they were busy tearing each other apart, I was sitting there with a secret gnawing at my insides. A secret I'd never intended to tell anyone. A secret that had been eating me alive since the night everything in our family truly cracked. Here's the thing. People assume divorce happens overnight. Like one day, Mom just snapped and filed the papers. But that's not true. The unraveling started long before. And I knew something that would completely shift the balance if it ever came out. Every time my dad launched into one of his smug rants, every time my mom's face crumpled, Every time my brother's silence screamed louder than any words, I wanted to scream, "You don't even know the half of it." But I kept my mouth shut, because if I said it, if I revealed what I knew, there'd be no going back. The secret wasn't about who left the dishes in the sink or who forgot an anniversary. It was bigger, darker, the kind of thing that could take a bad situation and blow it up beyond repair. And sitting there in that office, watching the people I loved most implode in slow motion, I started to wonder if maybe keeping the secret was making me just as guilty as the one who caused it. Because the truth has claws, and I could feel them digging into me deeper every day. That night after the role model session, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My brother was asleep in the next room. Mom was crying softly in hers, and Dad was clattering around in his study like nothing had happened. And me, I was drowning in silence. All I could think was, how long can I keep this inside before it destroys me too? After weeks of therapy sessions that felt more like sparring matches than healing exercises, things escalated in a way I didn't see coming. It was after one of the more brutal sessions. Dad had spent nearly an hour dismantling every word Mom said, twisting her sentences into knots, making her sound like she was irrational, while Mom's face grew redder and redder until she finally snapped. "You treat us like we're your students, not your family." And of course, Dad smirked like he'd just been proven right. When it was over and we were shuffling out into the parking lot, I thought we'd all just go home in tense silence like usual. But Dad stopped me by the car. "Son," he said, voice low but sharp, "we need to talk." My stomach sank. Nothing good ever followed those words. He put a hand on my shoulder, that same patronizing gesture he used when explaining calculus proofs to me when I was 10. "You need to start recognizing who the superior parent is here. This isn't just about divorce. This is about your development as a man. You can't afford to align yourself with weakness." I just stared at him. Did he really just call Mom weak to my face? He kept going. "It's crucial you side with me, that you understand where true strength and intellect lie. If you betray me," he paused, letting the words hang like a guillotine, "I won't be able to support you financially when it's time for college." There it was, not even subtle, an ultimatum dressed up as guidance. My throat burned, but I couldn't get words out. I just nodded stiffly, climbed into the car, and clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was crossing every line, but instead, I swallowed it down. Later, at home, I passed by Mom's room on the way to grab a glass of water. The door was half open. I froze. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking, crying, alone. For a second, I thought about going in, about telling her what Dad had just said, but my legs wouldn't move. It felt like if I said it out loud, I'd be choosing sides once and for all. So instead, I stood there in the hallway, fists clenched, heart pounding. My brother's snores drifted faintly from his room. He was oblivious, safe in sleep. And there I was, caught between two collapsing worlds, feeling like I was going to be crushed in the middle. By the time the next therapy session rolled around, the air between all of us was heavy. Even Dr. Sanders seemed more tense, like she could sense the storm brewing. After the obligatory round of rehashing the week's fights, she leaned forward and tried something new. "I want each of you to share something you've been holding in, something you haven't said yet but feel needs to be voiced." I shifted in my seat. My stomach twisted. Mom went first. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue and whispered, "I'm scared my boys will grow up resenting me, that they'll think I ruined their family. I don't want to lose them." My chest ached hearing that. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, but the words stayed stuck. Then it was Dad's turn. He didn't even hesitate. "I feel undervalued, underappreciated. I've devoted my life to the pursuit of knowledge, to providing for this family, and yet my genius is dismissed. I'm treated like an obstacle instead of the foundation." Mom muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath, but didn't say more. Then Dr. Sanders' eyes turned to me. "Your turn," she said gently. "What's something you've been holding in?" The room went still. My brother stared at the floor. Mom looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Dad sat back, expectant, like he was waiting for me to validate him. My heart thudded in my chest, because this was the moment. I could say something safe, like, I'm stressed, or I hate being caught in the middle, but the secret inside me was clawing at my ribs, begging to be let out, and I didn't know if I could keep it in any longer. When Dr. Sanders asked me to share what I'd been holding in, I swear time slowed down. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second hammering in my chest like a drum. My palms were sweaty, my throat tight, but for the first time, I didn't look at the floor. I didn't shrink back. I looked straight at the therapist, straight at Dad, straight at Mom, and I said, Dad has been sleeping with one of his graduate students for the last 2 years. That's why Mom filed for divorce. Not because she's selfish, not because she's ungrateful, but because he's a liar. The words were out before I could stop them. Heavy, irrevocable. The room went dead silent. My mom froze, her face draining of color like all the blood had been sucked out of her. Her tissue slipped from her hand and fluttered to the floor. My brother's eyes shot up from the carpet for the first time in weeks, wide and terrified, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. And my dad, Mr. Unflappable Intellectual, stammered. Actually stammered. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's irrelevant personal matters, he finally managed, his voice cracking around the edges. Irrelevant. That's what he called it. Dr. Sanders leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp. Is it true? She asked. The question hung in the air like a blade. Dad adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling. This is a private issue between your mother and me. It has no bearing on the children's development. But Mom whispered one word. Thank you. And it broke me, because it was the first time anyone, had acknowledged the truth out loud in front of Dad, in front of us. For months she had been carrying this weight, branded selfish and ungrateful, while he strutted around untouchable. And now, finally, she wasn't alone. Dad's composure crumbled. He tried to redirect, to reframe, to intellectualize. This is a gross oversimplification, he said, his voice rising. Relationships are complex. Human beings are fallible. What matters is the stability of this family, not dredging up. Stop! Mom's voice cut through him like a knife. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was sharp and steady, the kind of voice you can't ignore. Don't you dare turn this into one of your lectures. Don't you dare minimize what you did. My brother whispered, Is it true? His voice was so small, it nearly broke me. Dad turned to him, his face softening for the first time. Son, it's complicated. Is it true? My brother repeated, louder this time. Dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And in that silence, we all had our answer. Dr. Sanders cleared her throat, her pen frozen mid-note. It seems we've uncovered something very significant, she said carefully. This revelation changes the framework of our sessions. Mr. Dad's last name, infidelity, is not irrelevant. It directly impacts the trust and emotional security of your family. Dad bristled. I refuse to be villainized. But Dr. Sanders didn't let him bulldoze. This is not about villainizing. This is about accountability. Your children are sitting here processing this in real time. They deserve honesty. For once, Dad didn't have a comeback. I glanced at Mom. Tears streaked her face, but her shoulders weren't slumped anymore. She looked lighter, like my words had lifted some invisible weight. She mouthed, "Thank you again," and I felt something shift in my chest. For the first time since the divorce started, I wasn't just a referee. I wasn't collateral damage. I had a voice. My brother leaned closer to me, his small hand brushing against mine on the couch. He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at me, wide-eyed, scared, but also grateful, said enough. And Dad? For the first time in my life, he looked small. Not the towering intellectual, not the untouchable genius, just a man caught in his own mess, scrambling for words that wouldn't come. The session wrapped in awkward silence. No one knew what to say, not even Dr. Sanders. When it was finally over, Mom stood up first. She didn't look at Dad. She just put a hand on my shoulder and my brother's and said, "Let's go." Dad called after us, his voice shaky. This is not the end of the discussion, but as we walked out of that office, down the quiet hallway, I realized something. It was the end of something, not just the end of the lies, not just the end of Dad's control over the narrative. It was the end of me carrying the secret alone, and the beginning of whatever came next. When the dust settled from that nuclear therapy session, I knew it wasn't over. And I was right, because Dad wasn't the type to just take a hit and move on. No, he had to corner me to reclaim whatever power he thought he'd lost. It happened later that night. My brother was in his room, headphones on, probably trying to drown out the tension, and Mom was in the kitchen cleaning up in silence. Dad knocked on my door, then walked in before I could answer. "Close the laptop," he ordered. His tone was sharp, clipped, the way it got when he was barely holding back anger. I closed it, bracing myself. He stood over me, arms crossed. "What you did today was unacceptable. You humiliated me in front of your mother, in front of your brother, in front of a therapist who now thinks she understands our family dynamics better than I do." I didn't say anything. My pulse was hammering too hard. He leaned closer, his glasses sliding down his nose. "You don't understand the complexity of adult relationships. You think it's all black and white, but you're just a child. A weak, emotional child. Just like your mother." That last part cut deeper than I expected. Because yeah, I was emotional. And yeah, maybe I'd inherited some of Mom's softness. But in that moment, standing there with him spitting venom, I realized, if being like Mom meant listening, caring, feeling, then maybe that wasn't weakness at all. I didn't say that to him, though. I just clenched my jaw and stared at the carpet until he stormed out, muttering about how ungrateful I was. A week later, I was in my room when my brother knocked on the door. That alone was unusual. He usually just barged in or sent me a text. He shuffled in, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes down. "Can I tell you something?" "Yeah," I said, setting down my phone. He sat on the edge of my bed, silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I already knew." "Knew what?" "About Dad. About the student. I found messages on his laptop months ago." His voice cracked. I didn't say anything because I thought it would destroy the family. My heart dropped. My little brother, 13 years old, had been carrying that on his own. While I thought I was the only one holding the secret, he had been suffocating under the same weight. He looked up at me, eyes red. "When you said it in therapy, I felt like I could finally breathe. I don't have to hold it anymore." Pulled him into a hug. For once, he didn't squirm away. He just held on, like he'd been waiting months for someone to share the burden. The family is still fractured. Dad barely speaks to me. When he does, it's short, clipped, like I'm some stranger who insulted him at a dinner party. The college funding thing hangs over my head like a storm cloud. He made it clear he might not help if I keep aligning myself with weakness. Mom, on the other hand, has been different. Stronger, somehow. She told me, through tears, that I gave her something she'd been waiting for, validation. That after years of being gaslit and dismissed, hearing the truth spoken out loud gave her permission to stop blaming herself. And my brother? He told me I saved him, that he doesn't feel like a fraud anymore, holding on to a secret too heavy for his age. I don't feel like a hero. If anything, I feel like someone who lit a match in a room already soaked in gasoline. But maybe sometimes fire is the only way to clear out the rot. So Reddit, aita for exposing my dad's secret in therapy, knowing it would nuke what was left of our family, because now things will never go back to normal. But maybe they weren't supposed to.
ATA for going missing to expose my husband's lies? Hi Reddit. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. I need an outside perspective because I feel like I'm either losing my mind or I'm about to uncover something way darker than I ever expected. So, some background. I, 29F, have been married to my husband, Matt, 32M, for 3 years. We've been together for a total of 6. If you ask anyone in our circle, friends, family, coworkers, Matt is the perfect guy. He's the one people point to and say, "That's the kind of husband I want someday." He's charming, funny, quick with a compliment, and knows how to light up a room. But the thing about people who know how to light up a room, sometimes they know how to dim just one person in it. And that person has been me. At first, our marriage seemed normal. Better than normal, actually. He brought me coffee in bed, left sticky notes with little doodles and "I love you" scribbled on them, texted me during the day just to say he missed me. We traveled, laughed, and honestly, I thought I had hit the jackpot. But then, little things started piling up. Late nights at the office with no explanation. He'd come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. Not always strong, not obvious, but noticeable enough that when I leaned in for a hug, I'd catch it. A faint floral scent, sweet but sharp. When I'd ask him about it, his responses were smooth, too smooth. "Oh, I was just helping Karen with the presentation. She wears that overpowering perfume, you know the one." Or, "I had a client dinner, one of the women hugged me goodbye." They were excuses that sounded reasonable. And maybe they were reasonable. But the repetition, the nonchalance, the way he made me feel guilty for even asking, that's what gnawed at me. It wasn't just the late nights. There were also phone calls he'd step outside to take. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear his voice low, urgent, carrying through the closed office door. I confronted him once, asking who he was talking to at 2 in the morning. He didn't even flinch, just raised an eyebrow and said, "You were dreaming. You imagine stuff when you're half asleep." I wasn't imagining it, but he said it with such conviction that I actually second-guessed myself. Maybe I had dreamed it? Maybe the stress of my own job was making me paranoid? That became his weapon of choice, gaslighting. Whenever I'd bring up something suspicious, money vanishing from our joint account, vague answers about his whereabouts, he'd flip it back on me. "You're paranoid. Stop being dramatic. You're imagining things again." And slowly, I started to believe him. I started to think maybe I was the problem. This part still gives me chills. I handle most of the bills, so I log into our joint account regularly. At first, it was small amounts missing, $100 here, $250 there. Nothing drastic, but enough for me to notice. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off. "Oh, I grabbed cash for lunch a couple of times. You know how ATM fees stack up." Except, he doesn't even like carrying cash. And who spends $250 on lunch? The amounts grew. $500, $1,200, once $2,800. When I pushed harder, his reaction escalated. He'd sigh, roll his eyes, accuse me of being controlling and obsessive. He'd storm off, slam doors, sometimes sleep on the couch just to punish me. And here's the thing, I started apologizing for asking where our money went. How insane is that? The turning point was about 3 weeks ago. I was doing laundry and found a folded receipt in the pocket of one of his jackets. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. But something in me, a gut instinct, a survival instinct, made me unfold it. It was from a high-end jewelry store. A necklace. White gold with diamonds. The total? Over $3,400. And I'll tell you this with absolute certainty. That necklace was not for me. He's never bought me jewelry that expensive. The last thing he gave me was a pair of modest pearl earrings on our 2nd anniversary. Sweet, yes, but nowhere near the price tag on this receipt. I felt my stomach drop. My hands shook so badly I nearly ripped the paper. I confronted him that night, the locked glove compartment in his car, the new cologne he started wearing out of nowhere, the sudden gym membership he never actually used. I started keeping a journal, writing down dates, times, things he said, just so I could prove to myself I wasn't imagining it all. But the more I wrote, the more it looked like I was living with a stranger. Here's the part where I need your help, Reddit. Because I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something massive, and I don't know if I'm about to discover an affair, a secret life, or something even darker. I don't feel safe bringing this up to anyone in real life. His family adores him. My friends think we're the perfect couple. I can't shake the feeling that if I tell the truth, no one will believe me. But I can't ignore the necklace. I can't ignore the missing money. I can't ignore the lies anymore. I'd read a psychology book a few months earlier that talked about testing relationship behavior by removing the usual feedback loop. Essentially, stop being the person who can be blamed, or stop being the person who reacts, and see how the other responds. It sounded manipulative on the page, sure, but the book framed it as a last resort method to gather evidence when everything else fails. After 3 years of being told I was paranoid, it felt like the right next move. Here's what I did, step by step, because apparently my life is now a case study in covert operations. I packed a small bag, just clothes, shoes, toiletries, nothing dramatic. I didn't take my phone, I left it charging on the kitchen counter, which was the hardest part because my whole life is on that little rectangle. I left a note in my handwriting on my nightstand that said, simply, went for a jog, back soon. The note was believable. I did go jogging sometimes, and our neighborhood had cameras and people who knew my usual route. I told no one. Not my best friend, not my sister, not even my mother. The fewer variables, the cleaner the test. If I involved others, the story could leak, or someone might urge me to come back early and ruin the experiment. I made sure my car was in the driveway. I locked the front door and left like I was going for a short run. I wore ordinary workout clothes, sneakers, sunglasses, the whole out for a jog disguise. I intentionally walked past the security camera at the corner so it would capture me leaving in plain sight. I went to a cafe about 3 blocks away and sat with a notebook. I ordered water, no coffee. I wanted to stay sharp, and I watched the clock. I wanted to be gone long enough for him to notice and for my absence to matter, but not so long that anyone could plausibly think I'd been harmed. I used a burner plan. I gave myself an hour to see his immediate reactions. Text to my phone would show up when I eventually went back to pick it up. 2 hours for family to get nervous, and 3 to 4 hours for the full theater to start, the missing wife rollout. I also had an Uber scheduled on standby, only I knew the code, in case something went wrong or I needed to vanish completely. The whole thing felt wild. I felt like a spy and like a child sneaking out at once. The first hour was anticlimactic. I noted it in my journal later as calm before the theater. My phone, sitting at home, started buzzing at 23 minutes, 1 missed call from Matt. Then another at 25 minutes, then a text, "Hey, where are you? You okay?" I didn't pick up. I wanted him to react without me explaining. At 34 minutes, another text, "Come home. Please." That one sounded urgent, not theatrical. Maybe he was worried. I scribbled emotion in the notebook and forced myself not to go home. At 48 minutes, a voicemail. His voice, frayed, a note of panic that sounded just plausible enough to tear me. "Babe, call me back. I'm freaking out." He left the message with the kind of cracking tone you'd expect from someone who thinks the worst. A calculated part of me wanted to believe him. A defensive part of me wanted to rush back and throw myself at him and demand truth. But the plan was a plan, and the plan needed room to breathe. So I wrote, Hour 1, reactive, maybe honest, and kept watching. By 2 hours, my family started to mobilize. My sister called the cafe. I had prepped the barista earlier without giving details. I told them to mention me mysteriously if anyone asked. My mother's face when she learned I was in the cafe was a strange mix of relief and fury. She marched over to my table like a magnet attached to a panic button. "Where the hell have you been?" Matt called 10 times. I honestly don't know what I expected in that moment. A hug and a "you did the right thing" from her. Instead, I got a lecture. "You don't do things like this. He's a good man, you know that, right? You can't just run away." I took the lecture because it was part of the experiment. I let my mom drive home with the story that I'd gone for a jog and then decided to stop at the cafe. She left a voicemail on Matt's phone telling him I was safe. I watched the anxiety drain a little from her features when she knew I was okay. But under that relief was this strange, protective instinct for the man she'd never met in person, but believed in from birthday cake to Thanksgiving. I tasted the cruelty then, that my absence would pull people toward his story until it was his to own. He would frame the narrative, and everyone, including my mother, would start believing him unless I forced them to look at the receipts and the ATM withdrawals and the smell on his sleeve. Around the 3-hour mark, things got weird in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. I got a call, blocked number, shaky voice from a local TV producer. We heard someone's missing in your neighborhood. Is that your wife? The producer said they'd seen Matt on a live local morning segment, pleading with the community to help find me. She sounded breathless with the scoop and more than ready to run a sympathetic piece. I excused myself and watched a clip the producer texted me. Matt, on camera, hair tousled, eyes red, speaking into the lens with that practiced honey of his. He described me as missing, asked anyone with information to call, and volunteered that we'd been the perfect couple whose lives had been ripped apart by my unexpected disappearance. Watching him on television, my husband, my partner, the man who smirked at the receipt in his pocket, was surreal. He looked devastated. The performance was good, practiced, and internally consistent with what our friends had always loved about him, his ability to emote convincingly. The segment cut to neighbors holding flyers with my face, "Have you seen her?" printed in big, blocky letters. Matt was handing out the flyers like a man who couldn't hide his grief. He was playing the grieving husband role exceptionally well. I felt a hot, sharp anger then, not the trembling, fearful anger of the first weeks, but a cold, calculating kind that matched the tests I'd been performing. I thought, okay, that's the baseline. He'll act devastated. But to where? This is where the narrative takes the turn I didn't expect. The thing that made the test more dangerous and more revealing all at once. I was watching the taped segment again, because terrible, nosy instincts make you replay things when you're trying to find the seams when I noticed her. I'm not even sure how I missed her in the first viewing. She was in the background for only a second, standing by the corner where the local bakery is, wrapped in a coat, a phone in her hand, watching Matt hand out flyers. She was small in the frame, but she adjusted her scarf like someone trying to keep from being noticed. Her hair was pulled back. She didn't smile. She wasn't crying. She was just there. I rewound the clip a dozen times, each gaze more frantic. I sent screenshots to myself through an email draft I opened on my laptop at the cafe. I didn't want to use my phone yet, habit of the test. I began to catalog. She looked like a neighbor's acquaintance, not a random passerby. Her posture was too steady to be a curious onlooker. She had the calm, controlled demeanor of someone who'd rehearsed how to be in public. My mind ran through the checklist: female, unremarkable, quiet, observing. Nothing incriminating in a vacuum. But the receipt had been for jewelry. The vanishing money had been real. And the woman's presence at the edge of the frame felt like a breadcrumb in a trail I was suddenly racing to follow. Matt's social performance didn't stop at the local news. By evening, he'd pushed it into the community like a campaign. He posted a long, heartfelt message on social media, an eloquent blend of pleading and poetic grief. It was exactly the kind of post that would make people rush to support him. Friends commented with hearts and prayer emojis. People I hadn't spoken to since college messaged me. Even my boss sent a gentle, take care email, assuming I was dealing with trauma. Here's the maddening, skillful part of everything he did. He never, in public, said anything that contradicted my reality directly. He asked for help finding me. He posted my photo. He cried on camera. He gave interviews. He was the man everyone wanted to help. That night, he was lauded for his vulnerability. Neighbors left candles on our steps. Someone set up a GoFundMe that raised a few $1,000s in under 24 hours and credited searching efforts to Matt's leadership. I watched the donations roll in from the GoFundMe preview on my laptop, fingers clenching and unclenching. The money felt like a punchline, people giving to help find me while our joint account had been draining. I hated that I felt petty. I hated that the thought leapt into view. Is he profiting from my absence? But part of me also recognized that the spectacle he'd engineered created a social shield. People rallying around him would be less likely to ask awkward, invasive questions about finances or receipts or perfume smells. The more the public mourned, the more private cracks could be papered over. At around 9:30 p.m., the night had begun to close in. I had driven home that afternoon under an alias. I knew exactly where he was at each moment thanks to the neighborhood camera footage, and sat 2 houses down in my own car, watching him organize a search party. I didn't let myself be seen. I didn't want to spoil the performance. Then my phone, the one I'd left on the counter, finally rang. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. It was his number, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Hello," the voice said. Female. Calm. With an edge of amusement that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Who is this?" I asked without thinking. A soft, measured laugh. "You didn't think he'd put on a show like this without a private audience, did you?" My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, the necklace, the receipts, the umbrellas of grief for when things get stormy." She spoke casually, like we were discussing the weather. "I thought you might enjoy watching him perform." I had to steady myself against the car door. "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't like surprises," she said. "Someone who knows what a good thing looks like on paper." Her voice clicked out a small, precise thrill. "You should come home, you know. The show's about to get more dramatic." Then she hung up. I sat in the car for a long minute, heart battering against ribs. The call had been anonymous, but the voice, there was a confidence to it that felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. Not from my husband's tone, from the kind of women who move in the periphery of his world. Clients, publicists, someone who'd seen his smile on 1,000 Instagram posts and chosen to be part of the quiet gears that made it work. Whoever she was, she knew things. When I finally went in quietly after making sure the search party had left, I found the house swamped with flowers and stuffed animals, tear-streaked flyers pinned to the door. Matt sat on the couch, phone in his lap, red-rimmed eyes, and that same heartbreak honey voice he'd used in interviews. At first, he didn't notice me. He was more focused on the calls, the condolence messages, the stream of people pressing their hands to the window as if looking for the person who'd left them a life. Then he did notice me. He stood up so fast I thought he might run to hug me, but instead he went pale, the color bleeding out of his face like it did when his plan cracked. For a second, his expression was raw. Then it shifted lightning fast into something practiced that could pass for relief. The kind of smile someone gives when they're relieved a rehearsal is over and the actual play can begin. For my part, I kept my face blank. I had rehearsed my own expression for this moment, composed, a little wary, as if I'd simply popped out for air. When he said, "Where did you go?" I was so scared I let the words hang. "You did a great job with the news," I said flatly. "Very convincing." He laughed, not kindly, something brittle. "Thank you?" I had to do whatever it took. He dropped into the couch beside me and pulled me into a hug that felt like an invitation to confession. His body was warm, perfumed with that floral scent again. Close enough that I could smell it and imagine someone else's shampoo on him. I held back from pushing him away. Instead, I said, "Why the necklace, Matt?" He stiffened. For a beat, he looked real, like the man who'd folded the receipt into his jacket pocket. Then the practiced hurt returned. "You found a receipt," he said. "If you're accusing me of something, that's not fair. I was planning a surprise and you ruined it." I let out a breath and let him continue his litany of grievances like a man used to scripting his way out of a corner. But inside, I felt like I'd pulled at string in a sweater and found a hole that only widened. The woman in the footage, the anonymous call, the necklace that wasn't for me, and now his performance in front of the public. And then something else happened, something I didn't expect, and that will haunt me as much as the receipt. A neighbor named Helen, a woman I'd chatted with at block parties, knocked on the window. She'd seen me enter the house. She peered in, eyes darting between me and Matt, and then she did something ordinary and devastating. She waved. She waved at me like we were friendly faces, like we'd always been. She mouthed, "Call me," and then shuffled off with a polite smile. The look in her eyes was unreadable, pity, maybe, or a knock-on effect of the public grief. Later that night, Helen called me. She said, quietly, "You should go through his desk. You should look in the glove compartment." He showed me a picture once of a woman with a perfect smile. I thought he was telling me about work. I didn't know. Her voice was small, unsure. She kept apologizing for being nosy, for overstepping. But she had seen something, if only a shadow of it. I have never felt more paralyzed and more focused at the same time. It was like being given a key to a locked room and being told it might not open anything or it might open everything. So here I am, sitting at my kitchen table at 2 a.m., laptop open, the neighborhood empty, and my life suddenly as public as a TV segment. The vanish test had given me what I wanted, a baseline of his reactions, proof that he could play the grieving spouse convincingly, and a broadcasted trail that would shield him from skepticism. It also gave me new anomalies, that woman at the edge of the frame, the anonymous caller who sounded like she was enjoying his performance, Helen's offhand comment about a photo. My plan worked in the ways I thought it might. It failed spectacularly in others. It proved that he could manipulate the public and people I thought would have my back into following his script. It also proved that there were other people involved in the background, people who knew more than they were telling and who might, if I pressed them gently, hand me new pieces of the puzzle. But I also made a mistake. I underestimated how much the public drama would obscure private transgressions. I underestimated how quickly people would take his version of events and thin out the rest of the truth. And I underestimated the danger of poking at someone who could turn a neighborhood into an audience. So now I'm writing lists at 2 a.m. Who to talk to, what to look for, what evidence I already have, the receipt, the withdrawals, the phone calls I recorded in my head, and what I need next. Helen agreed to show me the photo she'd seen. I texted the anonymous caller back from a burner number I bought, but she didn't reply. Of course she didn't. That would have been too easy. There are so many paths forward, Reddit. I could go scorched earth, hire a PI and rip into his closets. I could be cautious, gather proof, then go to a lawyer. I could confront him publicly and destroy the sympathy fortress he's built. Each choice feels like stepping onto a different battlefield. Each has risks. Before I sign off for the night, here's the immediate cliffhanger I can't shake. Helen texted me a photo this morning. It's grainy, taken from across a cafe window. In it, there are two people, Matt, smiling with his arm around a woman I don't recognize, and the woman. She's wearing that same perfume I'd been smelling on his clothes. Her smile is the kind that looks practiced when you know someone is recording. In the corner of the photo, there's a flash of a necklace, not entirely visible, but enough to make my stomach flip. Helen wrote, simply, saw them last week. Thought it might help. She looked like she belonged in a magazine. That photo is now on my phone. I haven't shown it to him. Not yet. I'm sitting on evidence and 1,000 small betrayals. I have momentum. I have witnesses who might be willing to talk if I can convince them not to be afraid. I have to decide, do I escalate to a private investigator? Do I confront him with the photo and watch his facade crack? Do I go to the bank with my notes and demand answers? I don't want revenge. I want truth. I want my life back in the version that doesn't require me to prove my own reality. It started with a neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, who waters her hydrangeas like they're her grandchildren. She came over the morning after my disappearance and asked my mother, with genuine confusion, "Is everything okay with your daughter and that, Matt?" I've seen women coming and going at night, and I thought maybe she knew. My mother shrugged at first, because who wants to believe the man everyone brags about? But she wrote it down. And when Mrs. Alvarez mentioned names of other neighbors who'd seen similar things, the single comment turned into a threat. Neighbors are the worst, in the best possible way. They notice things. They talk to each other at the mailbox. Small-town surveillance is low-tech but relentless, and once it starts, it spreads. Mrs. Alvarez told me later, we started talking again only after I revealed myself, that she'd seen a woman leave in the early hours of the morning from Matt's car once or twice. She didn't think much of it at the time, kids in college, girlfriends travel late. She told herself. But after the news, everything got recontextualized. While people were whispering at the fence, my best friend, Jules, did the kind of sleuthing that would make a PI blush. She's the sort of person who'll call a bartender as if it's casual, and when the bartender says, "Oh yeah, Matt's tab last Wednesday was ridiculous," she'll press for details. Jules texted me a screenshot that made my stomach drop. Dates, times, itemized totals. Cocktails at 3 in the morning. Bottle service. A private room charge. Then, a separate thread. A hotel receipt. Charged to a name I didn't recognize right away. A small boutique place 2 towns over. A la carte charges for laundry, late checkout, and a room service bill with a woman's name listed on it as a guest. Some of these things felt petty, a bar tab, a late checkout. But collectively, they were a pattern I couldn't ignore. He'd been lying about his schedule for months. The money from our accounts lined up with nights he claimed to be in the office, leaving a trail of receipts that screamed otherwise. Jules printed everything and put it in a manila folder labeled, in all caps, "Do not let him gaslight you." She slid it under my door the way spies exchange envelopes in movies. I felt like a character in one of those thrillers I used to read, except this was the part where the protagonist realizes the villain has a whole cast of extras. Then there were his coworkers. I knew from random conversations that Matt liked to tell stories. He liked to be admired. But what I didn't expect was that, when asked, several coworkers admitted he talked about living two lives, not literally those words at first, but more like keeping things interesting, having a side hustle of charm. Someone at his work joked that he was two-timing life. Another said he was constantly flirting with danger. These were offhand comments until you read them as a map. Someone recorded a voice memo from a bar night where he bragged about the thrill of not being tied down, a throwaway comment meant to elicit laughter. That clip, when police questioning isn't a theater. It's a pressure cooker. They asked about receipts, about hotel stays, about the Dionysian bar tabs that matched nights. He told me he worked late. They asked why friends set up a GoFundMe in his name when our joint account was missing so much money. They asked for a timeline. At first, he stuck to his script. He played the man who was blindsided, the husband who loved his wife and had no idea what had happened. But under the sterile lights and the detective's patient, bulldog-style follow-up questions, his answers lost their polish. He muttered things about how our marriage wasn't great, how I'd been emotional, words that painted me, in their ears, as fragile, unstable, the kind of woman who might have run off. He said it so casually that my stomach clenched. The gaslighting came back through third-party confirmation. He used the same language he'd always used on me, but now it had weight because it was being repeated to others as a plausible explanation. Detective Klein didn't stop there. She pushed into the receipts and the hotel charges and, crucially, into motive. Why would a missing wife prompt thousands in donations? Why did I have evidence of consistent withdrawals that didn't match his explanations? Why did neighbors report late-night visitors? His answers were messy. He admitted the marriage had problems. He called me unstable. He said things that sounded like admission, but were couched as exasperation with me. It was like watching someone confess to being an asshole without acknowledging the damage they'd done. While he cracked in a blue-lit interrogation room, something else happened that I didn't expect. Someone on his side started distancing themselves. A woman who used to be a regular at his office, someone who'd been involved in the whisper networks of flattered coworkers, called a mutual friend and said, "I don't want any part of his drama." Another of his friends texted Jules, saying, "If what you have is true, there's no excuse." Matt's out of line. I saw the shifting sands. People who once admired him were uncomfortable with his obvious duplicity. I was tempted to come home then, to step into the chaos and reclaim my story. But I kept my distance. There's power in being unseen at times like this, in letting the people who have to look at him without you disrupting the orbit. I watched the court of public opinion do a tiny backflip, not full exoneration, but a movement away from the pedestal. Detective Klein called me at the Airbnb late one night. Her voice was low, careful. "We can't arrest someone on feelings or a receipt," she said. "But we can interview, follow the financial trail, and subpoena records." She told me they were looking at bank statements and hotel records, and that the neighborhood tips had weight. If there's evidence of a pattern of him misrepresenting things while funds are withdrawn and explanations don't match, that builds a case, she explained. "You did good by not confronting him publicly. You gave us space to work." I wanted to cry with relief. But I also felt a prickling anger, not only at the betrayal and the theft, but at the fact that I had to be the one who orchestrated my own disappearance to get anyone to take me seriously. There's a particular cruelty to watching your partner tell detectives that you're the unstable one while you sit in a cheap Airbnb 2 towns over and watch evidence stack up like a deck waiting to be played. He was playing a card, unstable wife, that still, for some people, reads as plausible. That was the old power he had used to keep me small. So I sat in the Airbnb and made lists. I typed timelines. I backed up bank records and took screenshots of receipts and social posts. I recorded voice clips of him from voicemails and the bar audio Jules found. I started a hard drive folder called Proof, as if labeling the evidence would make it more solid. Jules drove in to see me between work shifts with more receipts and a new development. An anonymous email sent to her with photos attached, photos of Matt and the mystery woman from a hotel lobby. Arms wrapped around each other like lovers who'd been careful but not careful enough. The email said, simply, "Thought you'd want to know." Whoever sent it didn't want recognition, just justice or gossip or the thrill of being right. There was a moment, a thin window, where I considered walking through our front door and confronting him with the printed folder in front of the neighborhood. It would be dramatic. It would probably ruin him in the way he'd ruined me. But Detective Klein warned against that. "Don't jeopardize the investigation," she said. "If you confront him and he destroys evidence or changes his story, we lose leverage." So I stayed away. I let him watch the police ask questions without me there to look like the aggrieved party. I let him spin his narrative and then watch the narrative fray, thanks to receipts and neighbors and detectives who actually listened. The last thing that happened before I started typing this was Detective Klein whispering, "We can get a subpoena for the hotel records. We can get his card transactions." But there's something else. Someone reached out saying they have footage from inside a bar that shows more than taps. They're willing to meet, but they want protection. Protection. Witnesses ask for protection. People who will testify want assurances. That sentence, "they want protection," is the hinge the case will swing on. If witnesses pull back, the receipts look like receipts and the bar audio looks like male bravado. If they step forward, it becomes a pattern. I'm still at the Airbnb. I haven't slept much. I check my phone and expect to see his face pleading for forgiveness, or a smug text saying I'm overreacting. Neither has come. Instead, I have a detective who believes the pattern is enough to dig deeper, a best friend who will lie awake on the couch thinking of worst-case scenarios, and neighbors who are suddenly more willing to talk. If you think reality has a good sense of timing, think again. The universe seemed to enjoy the drama of this story more than I did. 1 week after I vanished, the world had already started making up endings for me. Matt was trending on the local feeds as the devastated husband. The GoFundMe had ballooned and then cratered under scrutiny. Neighbors were whispering in different tones, from sympathy to suspicion to something like pity. And then, like a dropped tray of dishes, everything shattered in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't at the station when they cuffed him. I was 2 towns over in that same cheap Airbnb, living off instant coffee and an anxiety that refused to take a break. I'd been watching the news like a person watching a live feed of someone else's life, the kind of morbid, fixated attention that steals ours. Reporters, it turns out, are not content with sorrow and spectacles. They dig. They call. A local columnist with too much time and a nose for discrepancies started asking questions. How were thousands being donated on a missing persons page while joint accounts showed withdrawals? Why were hotel receipts showing a pattern? Why were bar tabs logged under a man who claimed to be working late? Once the reporters started calling his company, the corporate lawyers started calling the police. Someone in accounting noticed irregular transfers, flagged their boss, and the little threads of Matt's extracurricular spending turned into a red line leading right to the company's ledger. Once accountants get a hunch, it's like turning on a faucet. The water finds every crack. Within a few phone calls and a subpoena, the company realized funds were being siphoned in ways that couldn't be explained. The transfers were sweet talk and sleight of hand, small withdrawals here, legitimate-looking vendor payments there, and some cleverly hidden reimbursements. Not huge sums at first glance, but pattern matters. Pattern paints intent. And pattern led the police to him. They arrested Matt on fraud charges, embezzlement, falsifying company records, and some charges that had legal names I didn't fully understand, but that sounded ominous enough in the evening news. The irony wasn't lost on the reporters. The man who'd crafted the public image of the grieving husband was now the man who'd been stealing from the people he worked with. The station became a circus. Cameras clustered like vultures. Reporters tried to get a comment from the family. His parents gave a statement that sounded rehearsed. Friends texted me with bewildered emoji faces. Somewhere between the fraud squad's paperwork and the journalists' deadlines, the narrative shifted. The audience that had been feeding... This is the part where I have to admit something ugly about myself. I liked the idea of walking into that station. Not because I wanted to gloat, I don't care for petty triumphs, but because there is a particular kind of power that comes from reclaiming your own story. For months, he had been shaping how everyone saw me. The paranoid wife, the dramatic woman, the unstable one. Suddenly the tables were turning, but the view of me was still a stranger's thumbnail. Detective Klein called me that morning. Her voice was clipped, urgent. If you're planning anything, don't. But if you want to come in and give a statement, it could help. She explained they were investigating the fraud and wanted to understand whether any of the diverted funds had ended up in personal purchases. You know, jewelry, hotel stays, that kind of thing. My first instinct was to stay invisible. I had been invisible for a reason. But then Jules, who had been a godsend and also a relentless force of common sense, looked me in the eye and said, "You don't need to show up as bait. You need to show up as evidence. You need to be the woman who sits there and says, 'Here.'" So I washed my face, put on a shirt that didn't wrinkle in a car ride, and drove myself to the station. I folded all the receipts, hotel copies, bar tabs, the photo Helen had sent, Jules's folder, and my own notes into a neat stack. I had them in a manila folder like a prop from a legal drama. The weight of that folder was heavier than the weight of my body. It felt like carrying truth on paper. Walking in, I saw the cameras clustered outside, their lenses focused, waiting for a shot of the betrayed wife. There was a scrum of microphones and the smell of fast food coffee wafting from a news van. For a moment, I let them think I was the person they'd been waiting for. Then I stepped inside. Seeing him in cuffs was less cinematic than you'd expect. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. His hair was mussed, his eyes rimmed red. There was a rawness to him that the TV grief act had either masked or exaggerated before. He looked small in the collective glare of the police station. When my file was called, he wasn't behind the one-way glass. He was led into an interview room down the hall. Our eyes met as I sat down with Detective Klein across from me. For a second, one stupid, irrational second, I wanted to cross the table and slap him. Then I remembered the folder and the evidence and the logical part of my brain that had planned this differently. "Do you want to say anything before we start?" Detective Klein asked, pen poised. I unfolded the folder and slid it across the table like a quiet bomb. Receipts knocked together, a stack of evidence from months I'd been collecting like a hoarder of facts. The detective flipped some pages. Her brow tightened. "This will help," she said. Later, when I walked past the room where he was held, he was on the phone. I heard only snatches. "No, she's not missing," he said into the receiver. "She's here. She came in. She's acting like she's done nothing." There was a voice on the other end that sounded desperate. He saw me out of the corner of his eye and leaned forward, just enough for me to read his face. Surprise, then a flash of anger, then a slick, schooled look, the one he used when he needed to make someone feel small. When the police took me into the interview, Klein asked about specifics, dates, receipts, hotel names. I told her everything. I didn't dramatize. I didn't cry on cue. I answered with the dry detail of someone who had been collecting facts like currency. This was charged on June 12th to room 304, I told her, handing over a printed hotel invoice. He told me he was at the office. She wrote it down. After I left the station, the world outside felt different. The crowd of reporters had thinned to a line of people scrolling on their phones. Update alerts pinged from a dozen apps. Husband arrested, fraud charges, missing wife returns. The GoFundMe page I refused to let myself look at cursed, and then corrected as donations were frozen while investigators reviewed the account. Online, his fans turned into critics almost overnight. People who had once commented with heart emojis now called him a liar in comment threads. The bar tabs and hotel photos circulated with a speed that felt almost surgical. The image Helen took, grainy as it was, looped through feeds paired with headlines like "Husband arrested," "Wife returns." The narrative flipped from tragic missing wife to suspect in fraud and possible accomplice in deception. There was a part of me that felt guilty about the joy that bubbled up in some of those replies. It was petty. It was human. People like neat endings, and the internet loves a fall from a pedestal. I wanted to see how he would explain himself. Not for any noble reason, mostly because I needed to hear it in his mouth. Once the detectives had notes and a forensics team on his transactions, they allowed a monitored conversation. They asked if I wanted to speak to him. I said yes. They put us in a room with a glass window. He sat on one side, me on the other, a phone between us that we could both hear. The line was thin and brittle with formality. He looked at me like a man who'd been caught with his fly open, embarrassed and furious all at once. His voice, when it came, was softer than the one he used in the interviews. "You shouldn't have left," he said. "You made me look like a monster. You made me look like a liar," I corrected. "You made it about me, so no one would look at you." He leaned forward. "You ruined me. Do you have any idea what this has done?" "I have some idea," I said. "I have receipts, Matt. I have photos. I have neighbors who saw women leaving your car. I have friends who found bar tabs with other names on them. I have a bank account that bled while you told me you were at work." He opened his mouth like he was going to say something that would change everything: an apology, a confession, a plea, and then the old armor clicked back into place. "You're dramatic," he said, the phrase like a blade honed over years. "You always have been." He still had a talent for turning it on me, even cuffed and under a heat lamp. I wanted to scream until my throat hurt. Instead, I stood up and walked away. That night, his lawyer called. He was suave, polite, and adamant that paper trails could be explained. "There are business reasons for these transfers," he told Jules when she answered the phone, like a man who'd practiced for this exact contingency. "We will have statements. We will show intent was not there." His parents released another statement, that they were shocked and saddened. I read their words and felt nothing but an odd emptiness. I couldn't will them to see what I saw. I couldn't make them read the receipts. People say parents always know, sometimes they don't, or sometimes they protect the version of their child they hoped they raised. Friends were split. Some texted that they were so sorry and asked if there was anything they could do. Others, awkward and whistle-warm, said they couldn't get involved. The world is good at offering performances of support that require none of the sacrifice of actually helping. I slept poorly that night. The Airbnb felt like a bubble that had been popped. The evidence was in police hands now. The detectives were moving. But moving toward what? A conviction? A civil suit? Public humiliation was not the same thing as legal justice, and I wanted both, or at least I wanted the truth to be legally recognized. There's a piece of this I can't shake, even amid the tiny victories of seeing him in cuffs on the 6 o'clock. The necklace receipt. The woman in the photos. The anonymous caller who sounded amused. The receipts for hotels and the bar tabs. Fraud charges feel like a concrete thing. Accountants are merciless. But the other part of his life, the emotional theft, felt more slippery. He could be convicted of embezzlement and still keep whatever he'd taken emotionally from me. Legal systems and human systems are different. You can hold a man accountable in a courtroom and still find yourself waking up to the same absence where you wanted presence. But there was one thing that calmed me, the sense that, for now, I had been believed by enough people to make a difference. Detective Klein's team wasn't done. She told me they were going to follow every paper trail and subpoena the hotel's security footage if necessary. She asked if I wanted protection. I told her no, not because I wasn't scared, but because I felt safer with facts than with bodyguards. Just when I thought I could breathe, Detective Klein sent a text that felt like a punch. We pulled the hotel security footage. It shows Matt entering a room with a woman matching the photos. It shows items brought into the room that match descriptions of jewelry. "We need to speak to Helen. She's been subpoenaed." Also, we found one more transfer that went to an account in a name we don't recognize. I stared at that message until the words blurred. Another account. Another name. Another potential piece of a larger puzzle. If the fraud case is one thing, the emotional betrayal story may be another. A web that involves more people, or at least a deeper network of lies. The detectives are digging. The journalists are circling. The internet has sharpened its teeth. And me? I'm sitting at my kitchen table in the Airbnb, now packed and ready to move back into the house if the police say it's safe, wondering what it will feel like to open the door and move through rooms that remember me and that also remember him. wondering how to sleep with the knowledge that my life has been monetized, photographed, and weaponized. Right after he was arrested, the newsroom frenzy hit its crescendo. Local TV aired clips of cuffed men and scandalous spreadsheets. The GoFundMe was frozen, donors demanded refunds, and the company he'd worked for released a bland press release about cooperating with authorities and no tolerance for financial impropriety. On paper, it looked like a clean victory. Someone who stole from his employer was being held accountable. But headlines don't pay the rent on the tiny, corrosive doubts that live in the spaces between people. Matt's parents called me in tears and mostly anger. His friends texted that they were processing. My mother, bless her, barely looked at me when she came to visit. That was too extreme, she kept saying. You could have handled it differently. At family dinners, conversations curdled quickly. Cousins who used to come by with casseroles were suddenly awkward, and their eyes followed me like I was a strange exhibit. The neighborhood, which had been a chorus of gossipers, split into factions. The ones who said I'd saved them from being scammed, and the ones who whispered that I'd humiliated someone who might still be my husband in the eyes of the law. The detectives kept calling me in for interviews as their case solidified. Klein's team was extraordinary, methodical, humane when they needed to be, and coldly efficient when they needed to be. They subpoenaed bank records, got hotel footage, and pieced together the embezzlement pattern. They also shared some things in private that I had to process alone. Evidence that some of the diverted funds bought gifts, rooms, and dinners for the woman he'd been seeing. That stung in ways the receipts never could. It was an emotional theft layered on top of a financial one. But the trial was not a closed book yet. Fraud cases take time. Lawyers file motion after motion. The defense tried to claim clerical errors, misinterpretation of bookkeeping, and even, bizarrely, that I had orchestrated everything to profit from the donations. Yes, actual claim. My brain still trips on that ridiculousness. The internet, riled as it always is, cooked up its own conspiracies. She did it for views, some said. She wanted to ruin him, others declared. The crux of my family's anger wasn't that Matt cheated or stole. They acknowledged both privately. The rub was that I had staged my own disappearance. I had lied, intentionally, to the people who love me most. To them, that's unforgivable. Imagine if something had happened. My sister stormed once at my mother's kitchen table, where we tried to have come-to-Jesus conversations. What if she'd been hurt? You taught her to be selfish with other people's emotions. My mother's disappointment was quieter, but more cutting. You should have just told us. You should have come to me, she told me once, half pleading, half scolding. You didn't have to make your whole life into a headline. My aunt, who lives 3 states away and always took my side in childhood skirmishes, surprised me by saying, it was manipulative. You manipulated a community into pitying what you had orchestrated. She meant the way neighbors lit candles, the way strangers walked our street looking for me, the way the local pastor called a prayer meeting. In their eyes, I'd weaponized sympathy. I tried over and over to explain myself, that confronting him normally would have been fruitless because he'd gaslit me into silence, that the receipts took months to gather, and that the vanishing test was the only way I could get people to look where he'd hidden things. I said I'd been careful. I'd left a plausible note. I'd stayed in a physical realm where I could be found. I had safety nets, and that this wasn't a child's game for attention. I said I wanted truth, and sometimes truth requires unorthodox methods to surface. That didn't land. In family terms, the moral ledger counted the method as wrongdoing, regardless of the result. Their argument was simple. The ends don't justify the means. If I'm honest, and I am trying to be, there's a part of me that recognizes this. I caused pain. Not just to the man who betrayed me, okay, mostly to him, but to people who were collateral. My mother's trouble-scarred face when she told me she'd been humiliated for defending me was a stabbing memory. The neighbors who'd spent their time and emotional energy searching for someone who was safe, I had used their concern as a tool. I kept running the counterfactuals. What if I had gone to a lawyer earlier? What if I'd quietly wrestled the bank statements into evidence without the drama? What if I hadn't let the GoFundMe swirl out of control, even though I had nothing to do with its creation? Would the fraud have been uncovered differently? Would I have avoided the moral cost? And then pragmatism would shove its way in. Would any of those slower, quieter approaches have actually forced the pattern into daylight? He was good at charm. He was practiced at deflection. He had a social engine that kept people on his side. The receipts, the hotel footage, and the witnesses only mattered once there was public pressure to look. I did not manufacture that pressure for sport. I manufactured it to survive. Detective Klein and the prosecutors built around my evidence like architects reinforcing a bridge. They used my receipts and the hotel footage as linchpins in a larger argument about intent and pattern. The forensics team traced transfers and matched them to purchases. Witnesses: the bartender who remembered the late-night bottle service, the hotel clerk who remembered a repeated late checkout pattern, agreed to testify under subpoena. We had to prepare for the defense's attacks. They were going to smear me. They were going to try to paint me as the manipulative, attention-seeking wife who fabricated everything. It was a cheap play, but it was predictable. My lawyer, a sharp woman whose business card had no time for tight smiles, told me bluntly, "They will try to make you look like the villain. Don't let them. Tell the truth. Stay steady." So we rehearsed. Not dramatic stage plays, but clear, measured factual recounting. I learned to answer without theatricality. I learned to let the dry documents do the emotional work for me. It felt strange to be coached like a witness in my own life. But if the court believed the receipts before my face, that was justice enough. While the legal gears turned, he called me once from the holding facility. The call was brief and, for the first time since the receipts, raw. "Why did you do it?" he asked, voice small in a way that used to make me feel like I was the one failing him. "Because you were stealing from your job and lying to me," I said, without flourish. "Because you made our lives a ledger of secrets and thought you could manage both." He paused. Then, with the old tactic like a well-rehearsed chord, he said, "You could have just left. You could have just been honest," I shot back. Silence. The call ended. I didn't cry. I felt tired in my bones and weirdly light at the same time, like I'd taken off a heavy coat and still had to carry the folder of receipts everywhere I went. There's a fantasy that plays in my head sometimes, that the trial will be fast and decisive, that he'll be convicted, that the legal system will deliver a satisfying, clean justice. But I know the world. Trials are messy. People change testimony. Lawyers find procedural holes. The court system is a clumsy machine, and truth doesn't always fit neatly in its gears. Even if he's convicted, what then? Will the conviction rewrite the private betrayals? Will it seal the fractures in my family? Will it make the neighborhood stop whispering about the drama I created? I doubt it. Legal vindication is an essay footnote next to the lived experience of being lied to for years. What I can control is how I move forward. I can keep gathering evidence for the trial. I can try gently, with time and patience, to heal the relationships I strained. I can be honest with my mother about why I did it, to the point of vulnerability that doesn't ask for absolution, but offers explanation. And I can learn to tolerate the discomfort that comes with being the person who made a hard, morally gray choice for what she believed was safety. I know what the default Reddit format wants: an answer, a verdict. A quick stamp of YTA, NTA, ESH, or NH. The honest answer is nuanced and ugly. I don't think I'm an asshole for trying to protect myself and unmask fraud. I also don't deny that I caused harm through the method. I weaponized community emotion. I lied. Those are things I feel bad about. If you force a binary, I will choose NTA. Here's why. Everything I did was aimed at exposing a pattern of theft and deception that would have continued, probably forever. I acted after months of being gaslit, after receipts, after monetary disappearance, after being told I was paranoid. The method was extreme, yes. But the stakes, my financial security, my emotional well-being, the livelihoods of the people whose money was being funneled away, were also extreme. If you choose YTA, I will not fight you. I accept that my method hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt, and that the ethical line I crossed has consequences. I accept that being right about someone doesn't mean my tactics are morally pure. So here's where I hand it back to you, Internet. What would you have done in my place? Would you have followed the slow, bureaucratic path and hoped the receipts eventually mattered? Would you have exposed him publicly? Would you have quietly gathered evidence and let the bank or the company handle it? Would you have staged your disappearance? And if you were family, if your sister did this, how would you react? Condemn or understand? Protect or prosecute? I'm tired, but I'm also oddly relieved. Relief is a complicated emotion. It's not the same as peace. Relief is the knowledge that the truth is no longer entirely his to shape. The legal system will take its swings. My family may take longer to forgive. The neighborhood will gossip at their leisure. The woman in the photos, if she ever wants to speak, may one day be part of the record. For now, I am trying to be patient with myself and the people I love. I'm trying to hold the receipts without letting them define who I am. I'm trying to remember that surviving a lie and choosing how to respond to that survival are messy, human things. So Reddit ATA for staging my own Gone Girl to expose my husband? AATA for moving back home pregnant after my husband left me? Hi Reddit. I don't even know where to start with this, because my entire life feels like it's unraveling in real time, and I guess I just need to get it all out somewhere. Maybe typing this will help me process, or maybe I just need strangers on the internet to tell me I'm not losing my mind. Either way, here goes. I'm 28F, and my husband, let's call him Mark, 31M, and I have been married for 3 years. We were together for 5 years before that. By most measures, our relationship was never perfect, but I thought it was solid. You know how every couple has those ups and downs you laugh about later, like, oh, remember that time we fought about IKEA furniture for 3 hours? That's how I thought of our rough patches. Temporary. Normal. Surmountable. We had the kind of story that made sense to me. I met him at 23, freshly graduated, moving into my first adult job in marketing. He worked in IT at the same company, tall with this messy, charming kind of confidence. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but when he looked at me, it was like he really saw me. We started dating, moved in together after about a year, and by the time he proposed, I was all in. He wasn't flashy or over the top, he was steady. Dependable. The guy who remembered how I took my coffee, who picked me up from the airport without being asked, who once drove 2 hours just to bring me soup when I got the flu at my parents' house. So when we got married, I thought, this is it. This is my person. For a while, it was just normal married life. Mortgage, grocery lists, weekend hikes. Nothing extraordinary, but that's exactly what I wanted. Then, about 4 months ago, my life shifted. We found out I was pregnant. The positive test caught me off guard. We weren't not trying, but we weren't exactly making plans either. We had talked about someday, but someday always felt comfortably far away. Still, when I saw those 2 pink lines, my heart raced in this dizzy, terrifying, yet strangely exhilarating way. When I told Mark, I braced myself for shock, maybe even hesitation. Instead, he smiled. Like, really smiled. He picked me up and spun me around like some cliché rom-com scene. That first week, he was almost giddy. He bought a couple of those first-time dad books, the kind with goofy titles like Dude, You're Gonna Be a Dad. He stayed up one night sketching out a list of baby names, half serious, half jokes. What about Gandalf if it's a boy? Strong name, right? He even stood in the empty spare room, measuring walls with a tape measure like he was already planning the nursery. And in those early weeks, even though I was nauseous and exhausted and terrified, I felt this warm, steady glow inside me. Like we were stepping into the next chapter together. But then, something shifted. It wasn't sudden, like a switch flipping overnight. It was more like watching a bright flame start to sputter until it's just smoke. Around month 3, I noticed him pulling away in ways that felt subtle at first, but grew impossible to ignore. He started working late more often. At first, I believed him when he said projects were piling up at the office. IT emergencies happen, right? But then late turned into very late, and sometimes he'd come home looking drained, barely acknowledging me before collapsing onto the couch. When I'd ask how his day was, he'd just grunt, fine. He started sleeping in the guest room, blaming my tossing and turning. I tried to laugh it off, because, yeah, I had been restless, pregnancy insomnia, weird dreams, constant bathroom trips. But there was something about the way he said it, like it wasn't just my movements keeping him awake. Like I was too much. I tried to bring him into the baby stuff, the little milestones that were everything to me. The baby's the size of a lemon this week. I'd say, grinning, holding out the app on my phone. Or, do you want to feel? I think I felt a flutter last night. He'd nod absently, eyes glazing over like he was somewhere else entirely. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Hormones make you paranoid. Everyone says pregnancy is an emotional roller coaster. I convinced myself I was imagining the distance. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. The moment everything shattered was 2 weeks ago. I remember it so vividly, it's like my brain branded it onto my skull. It was a Tuesday night. I had made pasta, nothing fancy, but I was proud of myself for even cooking given how drained I'd been. I set the table, hoping we could just sit and connect, maybe have one of those rare calm evenings. He barely touched his plate, just pushed the food around with his fork, staring off into space. Finally, I asked softly, "Mark, what's going on? You've been so distant lately." He put down his fork, rubbed his temples, and then he said it. "I don't think I can do this." My heart stopped. "Do what?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely at me. At my belly. At everything. "I'm not ready to be a dad. I feel trapped." I stared at him, blinking, my mouth dry. "Trapped? What are you talking about?" We planned for this. You were excited. You bought books. You." I thought I could handle it, he interrupted. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even emotional. It was flat. Tired. Like he had already made up his mind. "But I can't. I don't want this life. Not now. Maybe not ever." And then, he got up, walked into the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag. "Wait, what are you doing?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "I need space," he said, shoving clothes into the bag. "I need to figure myself out. I can't stay here pretending I'm okay with something I'm not." He zipped the bag, slung it over his shoulder, and before I could even process what was happening, he was out the door. Just like that. I remember standing there, frozen, my fork still on the table, the pasta cooling into a sticky lump. The silence in the house was deafening. And then I broke. I sobbed so hard my chest ached, the kind of sobbing that makes you choke on your own breath. My whole body shook, my mind racing in panic loops. What did I do wrong? Why no? How am I supposed to do this alone? Because here's the thing, I don't have family nearby. I moved states to be with him. My parents are a full day's drive away. My closest friends are scattered across the country. My whole world was him. And now it's just me. Me and this tiny life inside me who didn't ask for any of this. The days after Mark walked out were a blur. I honestly couldn't tell you what I did or how I functioned. I cried until my face was raw. My throat hurt from sobbing. I didn't cook. I barely drank water, and the only reason I ate at all was because I forced myself to chew down a piece of toast while telling myself, "The baby needs you. You don't get to give up." I stayed in bed most of the time, staring at the empty side where Mark used to sleep. The sheets still smelled faintly like his cologne. That was somehow worse than if they didn't smell like anything at all. Every time I rolled over and caught it, I'd get hit with another wave of grief so strong I thought I'd choke on it. But after a few days of wallowing, something inside me shifted. Not because I magically felt better, God no, but because I realized that if I kept going like this, I was going to break. And if I broke, what would happen to this little person inside me? That's when I picked up the phone and called my mom. It rang only once before she picked up. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" Her voice had that sharp edge of worry that moms get, the one that makes you instantly crumble. The moment I heard it, I broke down again. "Mom," I sobbed. "He left. Mark left." I could hear her intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, honey." Her voice softened, almost trembling. "I'm so sorry." He said he can't do it. He doesn't want to be a dad. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth, like I was telling her about someone else's life. There was a pause, then she said firmly, "Come home. Just come home. We'll figure this out together." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, closing my eyes. For a second, the idea felt like relief, like a lifeline. But then my stomach nodded, because my relationship with my family has always been complicated. My mom and I are close, yes. She's my safe place. But my dad? That's a different story. He's old school in every sense. The kind of man who believes emotions are weakness, who measures worth by how hard you work and how little you complain. He never liked Mark, not from day one. He thought we rushed into marriage, thought Mark wasn't man enough to take care of me. He even made a speech at our wedding rehearsal dinner, half joking, but not really, about how he hoped Mark stepped up and didn't waste his daughter's best years. So the thought of showing up, pregnant and abandoned, felt like admitting my father was right. I could already hear his voice, "I told you so." And then there's my sister, Emily, 25F. She still lives at home too, not entirely by choice. She's been bouncing between jobs since graduation, never quite finding her footing. I love her, but we've always had a bit of a tense dynamic, me being the responsible older one, her being the free spirit who my parents alternately coddle and criticize. I worried about stepping into that mix, especially with my life already in shambles. But when I looked around my empty house, the walls closing in on me, the silence pressing like a weight, I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep sleeping alone in that bed, waiting for texts that weren't coming. So I made the decision. Last week, I packed up what I could into my little sedan. It was a surreal process, folding clothes into suitcases, staring at the empty dresser drawers, taping up boxes with trembling hands. I left the nursery untouched, which was maybe the most painful part. I couldn't bear to dismantle the dreams we'd started, the half-formed plans, the mental image of what should have been. I loaded everything I could fit, locked the door to the house that no longer felt like mine, and drove. It's a 6-hour drive to my parents' place, and I cried for probably 5 of them. Ugly, hiccuping sobs that came and went in waves. Every song on the radio seemed to mock me. Every highway sign reminded me of how far I drifted from the life I thought I was building. When I finally pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, I just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel. The house looked exactly the same, the faded blue shutters, the cracked front steps Dad always swore he'd fix. It was like being 16 again, except this time I had a belly and a broken marriage instead of a backpack and prom drama. The front door swung open, and there was Mom, running out with tears in her eyes. She wrapped me up in a hug before I even got out of the car. "You're safe now," she whispered into my hair. "You're safe." For the first time in days, I let myself believe that maybe she was right. But then, behind her, I saw my dad standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Not angry exactly, but not welcoming either. Just stern, like he was already tallying up my mistakes. "Let's get you inside," he said gruffly, stepping aside. Emily popped her head out from behind him, her long hair in a messy bun. "Oh my God, you're really here," she said, half surprised, half curious. Her tone wasn't cruel, but there was definitely an undertone of this should be interesting. I carried my bag inside, my mom fussing over me immediately. "You must be starving. Do you want me to make you something? Or just lie down? You look pale." I glanced at my dad, who was still watching me like I was under interrogation. "I'm fine," I murmured, even though I wasn't. That first night was awkward, comforting because I wasn't alone anymore, but also suffocating because I could feel the tension in every conversation. Mom tiptoeing around me with kindness, Dad asking short, loaded questions like, "So, what's the plan now?" Emily scrolling on her phone, but sneaking glances at me like she was already drafting some group chat updates for her friends. And me? I sat at the dinner table, staring at my plate, thinking, this is my new reality. I'm 28, pregnant, and back in my childhood home. This wasn't supposed to happen. The first couple of days back home were almost comforting. Mom had done exactly what she promised on the phone. She turned the guest room into a little sanctuary for me. Soft blankets, a stack of pillows, a water bottle next to the bed. She even printed out a few pregnancy-safe meal plans she found online and stocked the fridge with stuff she knew I liked when I was a kid: Greek yogurt, berries, even those little granola bars I used to sneak into my backpack. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was taking care of me. She'd knock softly before coming in, ask if I'd eaten, rub my back when I cried. And at night, when the house was quiet, she'd sit on the edge of the bed and just let me talk. Or not talk. She didn't push, but that calm didn't last. By day 3, my dad started in. It wasn't an explosion or a single blow up. It was little comments, muttered at first, then sharpened into something heavier. I'd be making tea in the kitchen, and he'd walk by with a snort, saying, "You made your bed, now lie in it." I'd sit down at the table, and he'd glance at my belly, then at me. "You can't just come running back here every time life gets hard." Or, my personal favorite, "What kind of example are you setting for your kid?" Every word landed like a bruise I couldn't show. I'd grip the mug tighter, forcing myself not to cry in front of him. I knew he never liked Mark. He made that clear for years. But there was something especially cruel about watching him aim that dislike at me now, when I was already in pieces. It was like he couldn't resist the opportunity to tell me I'd failed, and then blame me for falling apart. I tried to remind myself, he's old school. This is just his way of dealing with things. But when you're 4 months pregnant and abandoned, old school feels a lot like cold. And then, as if Dad's comments weren't enough, my sister started in too. Emily had been polite the first day, hugged me at the door, asked if I wanted tea. But by day 2, I could feel her irritation like static in the air. She'd sigh loudly whenever Mom hovered over me. She'd slam doors, roll her eyes, mutter under her breath. Finally, one night as Mom was making dinner, Emily just blurted it out. "Great. Now I'm the forgotten kid again while everyone caters to pregnant princess over here." The word stung. I was standing right there, slicing vegetables. "Emily," Mom warned, her voice tight. "What?" "It's true." Emily crossed her arms, glaring at me. "She waltzes back in here, takes over the guest room. Mom's making her special meals, and I'm just supposed to be invisible? Again?" I set the knife down slowly, my hands trembling. "I don't want to be here," I said quietly. "Do you think this is fun for me?" I didn't have another option. Emily rolled her eyes dramatically. "You could have stayed and dealt with your own mess instead of dumping it on us." That hit like a slap. It's not a mess. My husband left me. I'm pregnant and alone. "Yeah, and whose fault is that?" She shot back before stomping out of the kitchen. Mom just stood there, wooden spoon in her hand, looking torn. She reached for my arm. "She doesn't mean it," she said softly. "She's just frustrated. She's been struggling with her own stuff." I nodded, swallowing hard. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Now the house feels like it's holding its breath all the time. Dad's barbs. Emily's snide remarks. Mom caught in the middle, running interference, defending me when she can. Me trying not to cry at every meal. And every night when I go to bed in my safe space, I can still hear Dad's words echoing in my head. "What kind of example are you setting for your kid?" I'm starting to feel like a burden, like a guest who's overstayed her welcome, except this isn't a guest stay. This is my life now. I don't know how much longer I can do this before I break all over again. I thought I could handle the snide remarks. I thought if I kept my head down, helped around the house, and didn't make waves, things would settle. But the breaking point came 2 nights ago, and I don't think there's any way to come back from it. It was a Tuesday. Mom had made roast chicken, one of those dinners that used to feel like home. I'd helped set the table, trying to contribute so it didn't look like I was just mooching. By the time Dad came home from work, I was on the couch, feet propped up on a pillow because they'd been swelling so badly lately I could barely stand for more than 15 minutes. The door slammed shut. He dropped his keys in the dish by the entryway. I looked up, offered a small smile, hoping maybe this time we'd get through the evening without comments. But the moment his eyes landed on me, his jaw tightened. He stared at me for a beat too long before barking. "So, what's your plan, huh?" "Just freeload here until the baby comes." The words hit like a punch to the chest. My smile fell immediately. "Dad, He cut me off, voice sharp. "You think raising a kid is about running home when it gets tough? You think you're teaching that baby anything good by showing up here with your tail between your legs?" If Mark left, maybe he had a damn good reason. It was like the floor dropped out beneath me. My whole body went cold. I tried to hold it in, God, I really did. But the tears came anyway. Hot, uncontrollable sobs. I clutched my belly instinctively, like shielding the baby from his words. "Don't you dare," Mom snapped, storming into the room. "Don't you dare talk to her like that. She's your daughter, and she's hurting." Dad threw his hands up. I'm not being cruel, I'm being honest. The world isn't going to baby her just because she's pregnant. She needs to grow up and face reality instead of hiding in here like a child. Reality? Mom's voice cracked with fury. Her reality is that her husband abandoned her while she's carrying his child. And your response is to kick her while she's down. But Dad wasn't budging. He shook his head, muttering, "Coddling her isn't going to fix anything." I sat there sobbing, feeling like I'd shrunk into nothing. Like I wasn't even part of the conversation anymore, just the problem being dissected in front of me. And then Emily decided to pile on. She emerged from the hallway, arms crossed, hair in a messy bun, eyes narrowed at me. "Honestly, he's not wrong," she said. "It's not fair. I've been here for months, trying to get my life together, and now I have to share space with a crying, hormonal mess who's sucking up all the attention. Do you know how hard it is to focus on myself when the whole house revolves around you?" I stared at her, speechless. My throat tightened so badly I couldn't form words. Mom's face went red. "Emily, that's your sister. She didn't ask for any of this." Emily rolled her eyes. "Well, neither did I. But somehow I'm the one who's invisible now. Great trade-off." That was it. That was the moment I broke completely. I got up without a word, feet throbbing, and shuffled down the hall. I shut myself in the guest room and locked the door. Then I collapsed on the bed and cried harder than I've cried in years, those ugly, heaving sobs that leave you gasping for air. Through the walls, I could still hear the muffled sound of Mom yelling at Dad, Dad's low angry rumble in response, Emily slamming her door. It felt like the house was collapsing in on itself. And me? I curled up on the bed, hands over my stomach, whispering apologies to the baby. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this is the world you're coming into. I promise I'll do better. I promise I'll protect you." I stayed locked in that room for the rest of the night. Didn't come out for dinner. Didn't say goodnight. Just lay there in the dark, alone again. Except this time, the loneliness was worse because it wasn't just Mark who'd abandoned me. It felt like my whole family had too. Now I'm second-guessing everything. When I first packed up my car and drove here, I thought I was making the only choice I had. Staying in that empty house by myself, pregnant, abandoned, and drowning in grief, it felt impossible. I couldn't afford rent on my own. I didn't have a safety net where we lived. I didn't want to risk spiraling into depression with no one around to notice. Coming home felt like the only lifeline. And for the first few days, it was a lifeline. Mom gave me exactly what I needed: comfort, food, reassurance. For a minute, I almost let myself believe I wasn't broken beyond repair. But now, every room feels like it's full of tension. Dad stares, his barbed comments about freeloading, about me needing to grow up. Emily's resentment, the way she mutters about me being the pregnant princess while she's stuck in my shadow. Even Mom, who's been my rock, is clearly fraying from trying to hold everyone together. It's like I've dropped a grenade in the middle of this house, and every day the shrapnel digs a little deeper into all of us. Some friends I've managed to confide in have suggested I look into single mother housing programs or even shelters. I didn't even know those existed, honestly. They said I'd have access to resources, community, and maybe even some independence again. But when I brought it up, Mom nearly cried. She grabbed my hand and said, "Absolutely not. You're not going to a shelter. You're my daughter. You need support more than ever. Don't let your father bully you out of this house. You belong here." And I believe her. I do. But I also can't shake the voice in my head, my dad's voice, saying maybe I am selfish. Maybe I am expecting too much from everyone, barging back into their lives with my mess, turning their home upside down because my own life fell apart. The guilt eats at me. I lie awake at night, one hand on my belly, and I wonder, am I teaching my baby resilience by staying, or am I teaching them to lean on others too much? Am I giving them safety, or am I showing them dysfunction? I didn't choose for Mark to leave, but everything after that has been my choice. And sometimes I wonder if I've already made the wrong one. So Reddit, AATA for moving back home after my husband left me, even though it's clearly causing strain in my family?